What if we weren't the first? Not the first to build, to dream, to fall. Not the first to carve meaning from chaos or to gaze at the stars and wonder who might be looking back. Beneath us, far below the shifting crust and drifting continents, below the bones of everything we know, lies a question that fractures human certainty. What if civilization is not a one-time event, but a recurring pattern in Earth's long and patient story? The idea sounds like science fiction. It isn't. It is called the Silurian Hypothesis, and it asks something deceptively simple. If an industrial civilization had arisen on Earth millions of years before ours, would we even be able to tell? Could its existence have been erased so thoroughly by time that not even a single trace remains? Two scientists, Dr. Gavin Schmidt of NASA's Goddard Institute and Dr. Adam Frank, an astrophysicist from the University of Rochester, decided to find out. What began as a thought experiment would grow into one of the most haunting questions in modern planetary science. To understand why, you have to think like geology itself. Forget centuries. Forget recorded history. Think in eons. The Earth measures time not in lifetimes, but in the slow breath of continents. Mountains rise and erode, oceans open and close. In 100 million years, entire landscapes vanish as the crust is recycled into the planet's molten interior. Against that scale, humanity's story, 10,000 years of cities and steel, is no more than a flicker, a thin layer of dust between epochs. So what happens to evidence when time becomes the destroyer? Buildings crumble in a few thousand years, metals corrode and return to ore, plastics degrade, even radioactive isotopes disperse. The geological record is not an archive, it is a palimpsest, rewritten by fire, flood, and pressure. After 10 million years, our highways might appear as faint mineral veins. After 100 million, even that could dissolve into stone. The question then is not just whether another civilization could have existed, but whether we would ever recognize the ghost it left behind. The Silurian Hypothesis takes its name from a fictional species in the British TV series Doctor Who, ancient reptilian scientists who ruled Earth long before humans. Schmidt and Frank borrowed the name not to suggest dinosaurs with laboratories, but because the story captured something essential: a civilization erased by catastrophe and memory alike. In their scientific paper, they stripped away the fantasy and focused on measurable clues: carbon isotopes, sediment layers, fossil chemistry, and climate anomalies that might hint at industrial activity long before humans walked upright. One example already exists. About 56 million years ago, Earth experienced a mysterious global warming known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Temperatures rose dramatically, carbon concentrations spiked, oceans acidified. The causes remain uncertain: massive volcanic eruptions, methane release, or something else entirely. The Silurian Hypothesis does not claim that an ancient civilization caused it. It simply asks whether such an event, if driven by industry, would look any different after tens of millions of years. Would the traces of our own Anthropocene, once buried, resemble that same geochemical fingerprint? Imagine scientists 50 million years from now, perhaps not human, perhaps not even mammals, drilling core samples from the ocean floor. They would find a thin band of disturbed chemistry, traces of synthetic compounds, sudden carbon enrichment, shards of plastics turned to rock. A brief pulse of activity, then silence. To them, we would appear as an event, not a people, a chemical blip, a story without a narrator. Now, reverse that thought. Could we, in our own time, be staring at the residue of someone else's forgotten bloom? Could a pre-human species, reptilian, avian, or something stranger, have built cities that crumbled into dust before mammals rose to dominance? No fossils show machines, no bones hold tools, no ruins remain. But then again, why would they? In a world where tectonic plates swallow continents and rain dissolves mountains, what hope does memory have? Geologists call this perspective deep time, and it changes everything. Deep time humbles. It stretches imagination past breaking. It tells us that permanence is an illusion. Every civilization, ours included, is temporary architecture on a restless planet. The rocks beneath our feet have forgotten empires before. Perhaps they will forget us too. For Frank and Schmidt, this is not mysticism, but method. Their experiment asks how we might detect industrial civilizations on other worlds. If we study our planet's own record of pollution, climate change, and extinction, we might learn what such signatures look like elsewhere in the galaxy. To search the stars for evidence of life, we must first understand how life writes and erases itself at home. The Silurian Hypothesis becomes a mirror. By asking whether others came before, we learn how fragile our own legacy truly is. The implications are unsettling. We like to think our monuments will endure, that our technology makes us immortal. Yet time has no respect for progress. 1 billion years from now, the continents will have rearranged, oceans will have boiled or frozen, and the sun itself will have changed. What will remain of us then? Perhaps a thin layer of plastic polymers, or a faint isotopic scar in the carbon cycle. Perhaps nothing at all. But there is another way to see it. If intelligence can rise more than once, then consciousness may be a rhythm of the Earth, not an accident. Maybe evolution itself is cyclical, a process that gives rise to minds whenever conditions allow. If so, then we are part of a lineage older than fossils, a story written and erased across the ages. Each civilization may be a verse in a planetary poem too vast for any one species to read. The Silurian Hypothesis doesn't ask us to believe in lost worlds. It asks us to confront a simpler, deeper truth, that time is the great equalizer, and that every trace of existence is temporary. It invites humility, not fantasy. If we vanish tomorrow, what would remain of us 10 million years from now? Would future beings wonder who we were, as we now wonder if someone came before? Would they find our artifacts or only the chemical echo of our presence? Somewhere beneath the forests, the deserts, and the silent ocean floors, the earth keeps its secrets well. Each grain of sediment is a word in a language of patience. Each rock layer is a page turned by pressure and heat. Most pages are gone. Some are smudged beyond reading. But once in a while, a clue emerges. A strange anomaly, a trace that whispers, maybe there was more. Maybe the story began long before us. And that is the quiet power of the Silurian Hypothesis. It is not proof. It is perspective. It reminds us that our civilization, brilliant and fragile, is not outside nature's cycles, but deeply bound within them. That one day, we too will be a layer in stone. That beneath every city lies the memory of another world, waiting for those who dare to ask the oldest question of all: what if we weren't the first? If, however, civilizations rise and fall in predictable patterns, then we are inevitably faced with a daunting question. How long can we as a species endure? And more crucially, what remnants of us will remain once we are gone? These questions were not merely speculative musings when Frank and Schmidt introduced the Silurian Hypothesis. They were probing the very essence of civilization itself. They weren't just asking whether intelligent species could survive for long periods. They were challenging us to think about the conditions that allow any civilization, human or otherwise, to persist. Could a civilization last long enough to leave evidence of its existence? Or would its very technological advancements, which allowed it to thrive, ultimately be erased by the planet's inexorable forces, geological, atmospheric, and environmental? This is not simply a question of seeking the evidence of past civilizations. It is a call to explore the parameters that define the survival of any civilization. It's an inquiry into how civilizations interact with the geological and environmental history of the Earth, and how time, in its infinite course, erases or immortalizes these traces. By contemplating these vast epochs of time and the possible existence of other intelligent societies, we confront a much larger, humbling reality. We too are vulnerable to the whims of time. Our civilization may one day vanish, forgotten or remembered only as a brief flicker in the pages of history, while the world turns on, indifferent to our presence. Imagine for a moment being able to peel back the Earth's crust layer by layer. Beneath the visible marks of human history, pyramids, temples, ancient cities, lies a far deeper, more profound mystery. A mystery that could forever alter our understanding of humanity's place in the story of the planet. The Silurian Hypothesis asks us to entertain an almost unfathomable idea. What if humans were not the first intelligent species to rise and fall? What if, millions of years before our own ascendancy, another civilization reached its peak on Earth, only to vanish completely, leaving behind nothing but faint traces of its existence, barely detectable to our modern eyes? At first glance, such a theory may seem far-fetched, something straight out of science fiction, a mere thought experiment for a world that loves a good mystery. But it is precisely this element of the hypothesis that makes it so compelling. The Silurian hypothesis does not suggest that dinosaurs were building pyramids or writing epics in ancient languages. It doesn't delve into ancient alien conspiracies or forgotten superstructures that we might one day unearth. Rather, it raises profound questions about the very nature of civilization, about how advanced societies can leave behind their legacy, not in grand monuments or physical artifacts, but in subtler, more elusive ways. The term Silurian, derived from a geological period over 400 million years ago, is used here metaphorically. It refers not to the actual Silurian period, but to a long-forgotten civilization that might have once thrived, only to be lost in the ravages of time. This idea is inspired in part by the mythological Silurians of Doctor Who, a race of reptilian creatures who once ruled Earth but were eventually erased from memory by the relentless march of time. By using the Silurian analogy, the hypothesis pushes us to confront a fundamental question. Could another civilization have existed so long ago that it left no visible, obvious evidence behind? Could it have shaped the very nature of the planet without leaving a trace of its physical presence? The hypothesis contends that such a civilization could have flourished millions of years ago, reaching an extraordinary level of technological advancement. But unlike the awe-inspiring ruins of the ancient world, monuments like the pyramids of Giza, the Acropolis of Athens, or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, this ancient society might not have left behind any monumental structures at all. Instead, the only legacy of their existence might lie buried in the Earth itself. Subtle changes in the planet's chemistry, shifts in the atmosphere, residues of industrial pollution, chemical byproducts of an advanced technological era, these are the possible traces of a lost civilization. In this sense, the Silurian hypothesis shifts the conversation from the tangible, from the grand markers we traditionally associate with civilization, stone tablets, broken tools, crumbling temples, to the invisible. It is not the physical remnants that we might unearth in an archaeological dig, but the molecular signatures left behind in the very elements of the planet. This shift in focus from artifacts to traces, from the monumental to the microscopic, marks a radical departure from our usual understanding of what constitutes the remains of a civilization. The real challenge, then, is identifying these invisible remnants and distinguishing them from natural phenomena. Could the pollution, carbon emissions, or synthetic chemicals released by such a civilization have left a lasting mark on the environment? And if so, what would that evidence look like, millions of years after the civilization has perished? This raises profound questions about what it means to be a civilization and how we define one. Human history often looks to agriculture, cities, written language, and monumental architecture as the markers of civilization. But if such a society never built grand structures, could it still be considered a civilization based on the impact it left on the planet? The Silurian hypothesis forces us to reframe how we think about civilization itself. Rather than requiring a monumental legacy of grand buildings or written records, it asks us to consider the possibility that the most significant traces of a civilization's existence might not be visible to the naked eye. Instead, they might lie hidden in the chemical composition of the air, the soil, and the oceans. This line of thought also confronts a fundamental aspect of human thinking: anthropocentrism. We tend to place ourselves at the center of the narrative of life on Earth, believing that our rise to dominance is the natural course of history. The Silurian hypothesis challenges this assumption. What if Earth's capacity to sustain intelligent life was never solely ours? What if the conditions that allowed us to thrive were shaped in part by an earlier, unknown civilization? This question doesn't merely seek proof of ancient societies. It calls for a radical rethinking of Earth's geological and atmospheric history. It asks us to consider the potential influence of previous civilizations on the planet's environment. At the heart of this hypothesis lies a paradox. The very technologies that allow a civilization to alter its environment might also provide the means to erase all traces of its existence. It's a sobering thought. A civilization capable of transforming the planet's atmosphere, altering its chemistry, or even shifting its geology might, in doing so, render all evidence of its existence completely undetectable. Imagine a society so advanced, so interconnected with its environment, that it leaves behind no grand ruins, No written records, but only faint chemical remnants that future species could struggle to decipher. This idea is not merely speculative, it has real-world implications. In considering the Silurian hypothesis, we are forced to confront the fragility of our own civilization. Will future intelligent species find traces of us when we are gone? Will they look back, as we do with fossils, wondering what came before? What will remain of our world in the deep future? Will they ask the same questions we now ask about long-extinct species? As we grapple with these questions, we are inevitably drawn into a broader philosophical conversation about time, legacy, and the impermanence of civilizations. Are we the final chapter in an endless cycle of rises and falls? Or is our civilization just one part of a much deeper, older history that stretches far beyond our current understanding? These questions may not have simple answers, but they are at the core of the Silurian hypothesis. They ask us to reconsider what we know and what we don't about the history of life on Earth. As we explore this line of thought, we also find ourselves at the intersection of science fiction and scientific inquiry. Could science fiction be more than just a genre of imaginative stories? Could it be a lens through which we glimpse new possibilities, new ways of thinking about the world? Doctor Who, though a work of fiction, touches on these deep questions in a way that captures the imagination. The show's Silurians, ancient reptilian beings who once dominated Earth, live in subterranean cities, their legacy hidden beneath layers of rock and soil. Though a work of science fiction, it invites us to ponder the possibility that what we know about history may be far less certain than we would like to believe. What if, buried beneath our feet, there are remnants of a civilization so advanced, so intertwined with the planet, that it left only chemical traces behind? What if the true story of life on Earth is far older and more intricate than we can imagine? The Silurian hypothesis challenges us to think beyond the bounds of conventional science and imagination. It asks us to stretch the limits of what we know and to embrace the possibility that our understanding of the Earth's history may just be the beginning of a much larger and more complex story. In exploring this mystery, we confront the very nature of time, memory, and the impermanence of all things. The idea of civilizations existing below the surface of the Earth may seem outlandish at first, but it's not as far-fetched as we might think. In fact, this concept opens up a deeper inquiry that challenges the very foundation of what we believe to be the timeline of Earth's history. Could there have been other societies that preceded ours, their great cities now lost to the ravages of time and catastrophe? What if their achievements were swallowed by an unforgiving planet, their presence forever erased from the historical record? This kind of speculation has long fascinated thinkers, scientists, and storytellers alike. It raises the most profound questions about the impermanence of civilization and the hidden layers of our world. Could it be that we are only the latest in a long line of species to build, thrive, and eventually fall into the abyss of history? These questions spark our curiosity, nudging us to wonder what might have been buried beneath the surface, physically and metaphorically. Science fiction has played a crucial role in bringing these speculative ideas to the forefront of public imagination. Stories like those of Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and H.P. Lovecraft often explore civilizations far older than humanity, societies that once flourished only to succumb to the inexorable forces of time and fate. Their fictional worlds frequently depict the remnants of these lost civilizations, be it in the form of forgotten ruins scattered across distant planets or cryptic references to ancient beings that once walked the Earth. These tales are more than mere flights of fancy. They are rich in philosophical and scientific inquiry. Asimov's Foundation series, for example, delves deeply into the rise and fall of galactic empires, illustrating the notion that even the most advanced societies might leave behind only the faintest traces of their existence. These stories suggest that just as future civilizations may one day forget our own, we too might one day fade into obscurity. In this sense, science fiction does far more than entertain. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about history, humanity, and the future. These speculative narratives prompt questions that are not just theoretical, but also scientific. What would it take for a civilization to leave no trace behind? What if the remnants of long-lost worlds were so subtle that even our most sophisticated instruments could not detect them? Could the legacy of ancient societies be found not in stone monuments, but in altered atmospheric conditions, chemical imprints, or even the very composition of the Earth's surface? The boundary between science fiction and science itself becomes increasingly blurred when we consider how these fictional ideas have inspired real-world hypotheses. One such example is the Silurian Hypothesis, a concept rooted in scientific exploration that posits the possibility of ancient pre-human civilizations. The very idea of a forgotten civilization is not a new one, nor is it confined to the realms of fantastical literature like Doctor Who. Clarke and Lovecraft, too, entertained the notion that humanity might not be the first intelligent species to inhabit Earth. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, for instance, introduces beings and gods who predate humanity by millennia, leaving behind only cryptic clues embedded in ruins or etched into the very fabric of the human psyche. Though these ideas are born from surreal fiction, they give us the freedom to stretch our imaginations, to entertain the possibility of lost civilizations without the constraints of current scientific knowledge. Fiction allows us to explore the impossible, yet often in that very absurdity lies a kernel of truth. It opens doors to questions that might not otherwise be asked, enabling us to venture into realms of speculation and wonder that drive scientific curiosity. In this sense, the line between science and fiction is not as rigid as it might seem. The Silurian Hypothesis, for instance, provides a tantalizing thought experiment. What if we are not the first species to rise to prominence on this planet? What if our technological achievements are not unique in the vast expanse of Earth's history? This notion challenges the narrative of human exceptionalism, forcing us to confront the fragility of our own existence and consider that civilizations before us might have reached technological heights, only to disappear into the void of time. In our current age, where humanity faces threats of extinction, be it from climate change, nuclear conflict, or unforeseen global catastrophes, the idea that we too might one day vanish without a trace begins to feel all the more plausible. Could humanity, like those who came before us, one day fade into oblivion, leaving behind only the faintest echoes of our existence? What remnants might remain to tell the story of our civilization? And could some of those remnants, possibly from earlier lost civilizations, still be buried beneath the Earth's crust, waiting to be uncovered? This is where the intersection between fiction and science becomes particularly fascinating. Fiction provides a canvas on which we can paint the most imaginative and speculative scenarios. Yet, these very stories often inspire the scientific community to consider what might be hidden in the depths of time. What evidence might remain from a lost civilization? Could there be remnants of ancient societies buried so deeply that even the most advanced technology would struggle to detect them? Fossils, as we commonly think of them, are often the first thing we look for when searching for traces of past life. But in the case of an industrial civilization, one that might have risen and fallen long before us, what would fossilize? The very materials we use in our modern age, plastics, metals, synthetic compounds, are not likely to decompose in the same way biological materials do. Plastics, for instance, are made to last and could theoretically persist for millennia, offering a potential clue to future generations if they were to be buried deep enough in the earth. Yet, the question remains, would we ever find such remnants? Could we ever discover traces of synthetic materials buried under layers of rock and sediment, buried so deeply that time and geological forces have obscured them from view? Another potential clue might come from radioactive isotopes. Nuclear technology, with its long-lasting radioactive signatures, could offer an enduring trace of a civilization's existence. Some isotopes have half-lives that stretch into the tens of thousands or even millions of years, which means that remnants of nuclear waste or atomic tests could potentially be detectable long after the civilization that created them has vanished. Could we one day discover traces of radiation buried deep beneath the Earth, offering a stark reminder of a civilization's atomic age? Fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, are also remnants of ancient life, formed over millions of years through intense pressure and heat. In a sense, the burning of fossil fuels is tapping into a very deep past, as we are using energy derived from life forms that existed long before our own civilization. Could traces of ancient life, preserved in similar ways, serve as evidence of a prior civilization? Or would the passage of time and geological forces erase all such traces? The challenge of detecting such evidence becomes even more complex when we consider the dynamic nature of our planet. Earth is not a static environment. It is constantly changing through volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, erosion, and the slow yet relentless movement of tectonic plates. These forces reshape the surface, constantly recycling materials and obscuring the remnants of past worlds. As the Earth's surface is continuously reshaped, the chances of finding traces of a long-lost civilization become increasingly slim. But even within these daunting challenges, the possibility remains. As science continues to evolve, and as our methods of exploration become more sophisticated, the question of whether we can detect the traces of a forgotten civilization buried deep beneath the Earth's surface continues to intrigue and inspire. Could we one day uncover the secrets of ancient worlds hidden below us? Or will they remain shrouded in mystery, lost to the passage of time? For now, the answer is elusive, and the search for the remnants of ancient civilizations remains one of the most captivating mysteries of our time. The Earth is a constantly changing, dynamic system, a colossal machine of geological forces that never stops. What stands firm today may be gone tomorrow. Continents drift silently, mountains crumble in the face of time's slow erosion, and oceans relentlessly swallow entire coastlines. Even the hardest, most durable materials are not immune to these slow-moving forces. Over time, all things are broken down, reduced to dust, and scattered across the planet. What may seem permanent, whether a mountain range or a city skyline, is in reality just a fleeting moment in the grand cycle of Earth's geological processes. Erosion is an unstoppable force. It wears down even the most pristine and seemingly unchanging landscapes, scattering fragments of the past far and wide. Any remnants of ancient civilizations, be it buildings, tools, or even the chemical byproducts of human activity, could simply disappear, swallowed by the relentless passage of time. Even the hardiest structures, built to withstand centuries or millennia, are no match for the forces of erosion, tectonic shifts, and the ceaseless movement of the Earth's crust. When we think of civilizations lost to time, we are forced to face a sobering realization. The window for archaeological discovery is incredibly narrow. Civilizations that might have existed millions of years ago would have left only the faintest traces, most of which could have been long obliterated by natural processes before humanity even arrived on the scene. This thought leads us to a perplexing conclusion. Our search for evidence of ancient civilizations may, in the end, be akin to searching for a needle in an ever-shifting haystack. The odds are stacked against us, yet we press on, hoping for a breakthrough. The question remains, could we ever find evidence of a civilization that vanished millions of years ago, lost to time and geological upheaval? In our search for these lost civilizations, we may be looking in the wrong places, focusing on the wrong kinds of evidence. The fossil record, rich with the traces of ancient life, offers little in terms of advanced human civilizations. Rather than searching for tools, ruins, or even the skeletal remains of individuals, we might need to turn our attention to the Earth itself, to its geological record. Strange, unexplained patterns in rock layers, unusual chemical compositions, or concentrations of elements that don't fit the natural order of things could point to something extraordinary. These geological anomalies, subtle though they may be, could offer clues to a long-lost society that left behind no obvious material traces. What we might need, however, is not just curiosity, but technology. The future holds immense promise in helping us detect these faint signals. New advancements in deep-time archaeology, radiometric dating, and geochemistry may soon allow us to peer even further into the Earth's history, unearthing evidence of ancient industrial activity or societal traces we currently have no method for detecting. Imagine the possibility of tools, sophisticated instruments, or even chemicals that humans once used, long buried in the Earth's layers, waiting to be discovered by a technology not yet conceived. Yet, even if we were to detect the faintest traces of an ancient civilization, would we be able to understand them? Without written records, without cultural context, any findings would be open to misinterpretation. A strange isotope signature, a mysterious chemical deposit, or an unusual rock formation might seem like nothing more than a natural anomaly to the untrained eye. And even if we could recognize such remnants as evidence of a once great civilization, how could we possibly comprehend the significance of what we had found? What would the mind of a civilization lost to time look like? What would its culture, its philosophies, its technologies, and its achievements have been? Understanding this would require far more than the discovery of material remains. It would require an entire rethinking of history itself. The quest to uncover such civilizations seems daunting, even impossible, yet the possibility remains. If we know where to look and how to interpret what we find, we may one day uncover evidence that was once thought to be lost forever. It's a tantalizing thought, but it raises another profound issue. How do we begin to make sense of timescales that stretch far beyond human comprehension? The very concept of time itself is one that we struggle to understand. In our daily lives, time seems like a fixed linear progression, moving steadily from the past to the present and into the future. But when we consider deep time, the vast span of geological history stretching across billions of years, our perception of time shrinks into near irrelevance. The history of Earth is so vast that the entire span of human existence, with all its triumphs, tragedies, and innovations, can be reduced to little more than an infinitesimal flicker on the grand timeline of the planet. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine if we could condense the entire history of the Earth into a single calendar year. January 1st marks the formation of the planet, a fiery, chaotic ball of gas and dust. The first stirrings of life appear on March 21st, an unremarkable event, barely visible in the context of the vast expanse of time. For the next several months, Earth is home only to microscopic organisms. It's not until late in November that more complex life forms, those with shells, organs, and skeletons, begin to emerge. Despite these monumental milestones, it isn't until the very last moments of December that mammals and eventually humans appear on the scene. And then, in the final seconds of December 31st, we arrive. The sheer enormity of Earth's history makes human existence seem like a brief spark in the vast darkness of time. This vastness, this sense of deep time, is difficult for our minds to grasp. We struggle to comprehend periods that stretch into the hundreds of millions of years, and yet they are the very foundation of Earth's evolution. Our entire existence, all of humanity's achievements and failures, is but a blink of an eye in this grand scheme. And it's not just our species. Earth's history is filled with life forms, ecosystems, and civilizations that have risen and fallen long before we came onto the scene. Some of them left behind nothing but traces of their existence, and even those have been erased over time. As we attempt to understand this deep time, we are faced with the limitation of our tools and methods. Paleontologists and geologists have divided time into eons, eras, periods, and epochs, but even these divisions seem somewhat arbitrary. Time cannot be neatly packaged into easily digestible chunks. It is more like an ocean, vast and endless, constantly shifting and reshaping itself. The fossil record, our primary window into the distant past, is incredibly fragile. Fossils themselves are rare, preserved only under specific, sometimes exceptional conditions. For every fossil we uncover, countless others have been lost, ground down into nothing by the forces of time and nature. In addition to the fossils we have found, there are vast stretches of time, epochs so ancient that leave no trace at all. Rocks have been crushed, melted, or transformed beyond recognition. Whole ecosystems have disappeared without a trace, their existence reduced to whispers in the wind. And some civilizations, potentially more advanced than ours, may have existed long before us, leaving no record behind, erased by the grinding forces of time. In the grand expanse of deep time, natural forces such as plate tectonics, volcanic eruptions, and erosion work ceaselessly to reshape the Earth's surface, erasing whatever came before. The Earth has experienced countless shifts in climate, the rise and fall of species, and the collapse of entire ecosystems. Extinctions have occurred on a global scale, wiping out entire worlds of life, and yet these events, no matter how monumental, often slip quietly into oblivion. Perhaps the most humbling aspect of deep time is the realization that even the most significant events, even the rise and fall of entire civilizations, can be lost forever. Entire worlds may have existed before us, only to vanish without leaving a trace. Yet, despite all this, time itself is not an unchanging constant. It bends, stretches, and shifts in ways we don't fully understand. Imagine a timeline of Earth's history with vast gaps, missing pieces where no records exist, no fossils remain. These gaps, these absences, are some of the greatest mysteries in the history of our planet. They represent what we will never know, what is forever beyond our reach. If a civilization did exist millions of years ago, how could we possibly find its remnants? What can we even infer from the traces that remain? The search for ancient civilizations lost to deep time presents us with a paradox. We are left with only the faintest whispers of a past we may never fully comprehend, and yet we continue to seek, reaching out into the abyss of time. The remnants of the distant past, those faint whispers of a civilization long forgotten, could be buried so deep within the Earth's layers that we may never recognize them, no matter how hard we search. The Earth, constantly shifting and evolving under the influence of geological forces, has a way of hiding its history beneath its ever-changing surface. What we see today is merely a snapshot of the planet at this particular moment in time, but what it looked like millennia ago or even millions of years ago is a question we may never fully answer. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, the human presence is but a fleeting moment, if even that. And yet, despite these immense challenges, we continue to dig, to probe, and to search for any evidence that could reveal the secrets of a lost world. As we explore the vast and mysterious history of the Earth, we often find ourselves grappling with the idea that what we see today is only a fraction of the story. The delicate dance of geological processes, plate tectonics, erosion, and the cycle of weathering means that evidence from ancient civilizations may have been entirely erased by natural forces over time. The possibility that there once existed a thriving civilization long before ours seems almost inconceivable, but still, we search. We search for ancient fossilized bones, the faint markings of tools left behind, or even the subtle traces of metals and chemicals that could suggest the existence of people or societies who lived on this planet long before our time. So, what would we even look for if there was a forgotten civilization hidden beneath our feet? Would we find their technologies buried deep in the earth, waiting to be discovered by a future that may never come? Could something as permanent seeming as plastics, materials we often assume will last forever, have survived the ravages of time? These are the questions we wrestle with as we continue to dig, hoping to uncover the traces of a lost world. But perhaps it is not just the materials we find, but the patterns and signs they leave behind that will eventually lead us to the story of a civilization long forgotten. Even now, scientists are uncovering tiny, often overlooked clues about life from millions of years ago. Consider, for instance, the discovery of ancient microfossils, microscopic remnants of life that can tell us far more than we ever imagined about the creatures that once roamed the earth. These tiny fossils can unlock secrets about ancient ecosystems and give us insight into the world as it once was. Or think about the isotopes embedded in rocks, which can reveal changes in the Earth's atmosphere and hint at the presence of chemicals or pollutants that shouldn't be there. Through these discoveries, we are beginning to see that the planet is far more complex than we ever imagined. Despite the fact that we don't always know exactly what we're looking for, there is one thing we know for certain: the past is still out there. Hidden beneath layers of rock, buried in the deep ocean, or even within the Earth's mantle, the remnants of ancient life may be waiting for us to uncover them. Time itself becomes an enigma, fluid and unknowable. As we attempt to make sense of it, we often feel as though we are standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable, trying to piece together a story that spans millions of years. And yet the more we learn, the more we realize how little we truly understand. This vastness of time is not just a challenge to our understanding of the past, it is also a humbling reminder of how fleeting our presence on this planet is. If we imagine the entire history of the Earth compressed into a single year, we can begin to grasp the scale of time that shapes our world. The Earth forms in early January, and the first signs of life appear in early March. Multicellular life emerges in mid-September, and dinosaurs arrive on December 13th, only to vanish by December 26th. Humans, our species, don't show up until the final seconds of December 31st. This perspective illustrates just how small a fraction of time we occupy on the vast timeline of the Earth. Civilizations, ours included, have existed for mere moments in comparison to the eons that came before us. And when we think about the possibility of a civilization that existed even before us, within that vast stretch of deep time, we must confront the immense geological forces that could have erased any trace of it. The Earth itself acts as a recycler, constantly reshaping its surface and leaving behind only the faintest, most fragile remnants of the past. But where could the evidence of such a civilization be hidden? Could it lie buried beneath the ocean floor, deep within the crust of the Earth, or lost in the shifting sands of time? The ocean itself is a vast and ever-changing landscape, constantly in motion, erasing and rebuilding entire ecosystems. Could ancient cities, or the remnants of a civilization's technologies, lie deep beneath the ocean, entombed in layers of sediment that may never be disturbed? Or perhaps these traces are hidden in the farthest reaches of the Earth's mantle, locked away under unimaginable pressure and heat, beyond our reach and understanding. In exploring the idea of a forgotten civilization, we must also grapple with the overwhelming forces of Earth's geology. The planet operates on a timescale so vast, so incomprehensible that human history is barely a blip on the radar. Earth's surface is constantly shifting and changing, driven by the movement of tectonic plates that reshape continents, create mountains, and form new landmasses. But this process is not just one of creation, it is also one of destruction. The forces of subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, act like nature's eraser, wiping away ancient coastlines, forests, and perhaps even civilizations. The ancient supercontinent of Pangaea, for example, existed around 300 million years ago, but as it split apart and the continents we know today were formed, any evidence of past civilizations on that landmass would have been obliterated by the shifting of the Earth's crust. The search for evidence of a lost civilization becomes something of a paradox. The planet, in its relentless activity, erases much of its own history. What little does survive, whether in the form of fossils or rock layers, requires a specific set of conditions to be preserved. Fossils, for example, are rare glimpses into the distant past, but they are not guaranteed to form. The right conditions must be in place: the proper temperature, pressure, and environment. Without these conditions, organic material decays, leaving no trace. Even the most durable of human creations, be they buildings, tools, or technologies, are not immune to the forces of time. As we consider the possibility of an ancient civilization existing long before humanity, we must also reckon with the fact that there are vast gaps in the geological record. These time gaps, periods in which no evidence of life or civilization remains, make it all the more difficult to piece together the story of the past. Entire continents and ecosystems have vanished over time, swept away by the forces of erosion, buried beneath the weight of mountains, or drowned by rising seas. These gaps in time only deepen the mystery of Earth's history, leaving us with questions that may never have answers. Despite the frustration of these gaps, we continue to search. As we do, we are drawn into a sense of cosmic humility, recognizing that the Earth moves on, indifferent to the rise and fall of civilizations. Yet beneath the surface of our planet, we can't help but wonder, could there have been a time, long before our own, when another civilization walked the Earth? Was there a people who lived on this planet before us, whose legacy was lost to the sands of time? And if so, what might we have missed? What wisdom, technologies, and stories have been erased by the relentless march of geological time? Throughout Earth's long history, there have been moments of catastrophic upheaval, mass extinctions that reset the course of life on the planet. The most well-known of these events, such as the Permian-Triassic extinction, which wiped out nearly 96% of life, or the Cretaceous-Paleogene event that brought an end to the age of the dinosaurs, have shaped the planet as we know it today. These extinction events, though devastating, also serve as turning points in Earth's history, setting the stage for new beginnings. Each time the Earth resets, life reinvents itself, evolving and emerging anew. These chaotic resets, though destructive, are integral to the evolution of life. They may have shaped the planet, but they also reveal the fragility of life itself. And as we look back on the timeline of Earth's existence, we are left to wonder, what if one of these resets wiped away an advanced civilization, leaving no trace behind? What if in the deepest, most forgotten corners of Earth's history, there existed a world we can never know? The questions remain, hidden in the deep time of Earth's great forgetting. Could an advanced civilization, much like our own, be susceptible to the forces of planetary resets? Or, even more provocatively, is it possible that such a civilization has already risen and fallen, its traces erased by time, its legacy lost to the deep, uncharted folds of Earth's history? These questions, daunting as they may seem, draw us into a fascinating contemplation of our place in the cosmic cycle. Throughout the ages, Earth has endured 5 major extinction events, each one a cataclysm that shattered life in ways that are still not fully understood. These mass die-offs were not mere erasures of individual species. They were resets, catastrophic events that changed the entire trajectory of life on this planet. Each time one of these events occurred, the survivors found themselves faced with the monumental task of reimagining the Earth. The ecosystems they knew were gone, and the world they returned to was unrecognizable. It was a time of upheaval, a biological and ecological reinvention. Among these, the Permian-Triassic extinction, the largest and most devastating, provides an eerie analogy for the potential collapse of human civilization. This event, more than 250 million years ago, wiped out around 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. Imagine a scenario where the balance of life, as it exists today, is irrevocably destroyed. Could humanity, with all its advances and achievements, withstand such a cataclysmic event? Or would we too be swept away, leaving behind nothing but faint clues for a future civilization to ponder? In the aftermath of the Permian-Triassic extinction, life did not immediately spring back into action. The planet lay dormant for what seemed like an eternity, the shattered ecosystems gradually giving way to new forms of life. Dinosaurs, which would eventually rise to dominance, did not immediately claim their place. For millions of years, Earth's biosphere underwent a slow, chaotic reorganization. Entire ecosystems needed to be rebuilt, and new niches were filled by species that could adapt to the radically altered conditions. The recovery was neither smooth nor linear. It was unpredictable and disordered, much like how society might react to a catastrophic collapse of its own. Would we be able to adapt to such a dramatic event, or would our civilization, like so many before us, falter and fall? The answer, unfortunately, lies in the unanswerable. For just as Earth's ecosystems had to reboot after the extinction, so too could human civilization be forced to restart, its knowledge and achievements scattered to the wind. If we consider the Permian-Triassic extinction in more detail, the scale of devastation becomes even more chilling. The Earth's atmosphere, once a life-sustaining blanket, was suffocated by toxic gases. Oceans became acidified, and the climate transformed into an inhospitable furnace. The ecosystems that eventually emerged in the wake of this devastation were radically different. Life forms that survived this era had been uniquely adapted to an environment that no longer resembled the one they once knew. In such a scenario, could the remains of an advanced civilization be hidden beneath the Earth's surface, buried under miles of rock, sand, and shifting geological plates? The thought is unsettling. A society once brimming with technology, art, and culture could, in an instant, become nothing more than a forgotten chapter in the Earth's geological record. What if we were not the first to thrive on this planet, but rather one of many civilizations that have risen and fallen, with their achievements never to be uncovered? In many ways, the fate of a lost civilization mirrors the post-extinction world. After each of these great die-offs, life had to begin again, rebuilding from the scattered remnants of what came before. The creatures that survived were often vastly different from their predecessors, as if nature herself was experimenting with new forms of life. If humanity were to disappear in the wake of a mass extinction, what fragments of our civilization would endure? Would our technologies, our culture, and our societal structures be completely wiped away, lost to time? Or could they survive, hidden beneath layers of sediment, waiting for a future species to uncover them? As we delve deeper into Earth's history, we begin to appreciate just how fragile our existence really is. The more we uncover about past extinctions, the more we realize that entire chapters of Earth's history have been erased before we could even begin to understand them. Could it be that the next great extinction is already on the horizon? If so, what might we leave behind? And more intriguingly, how would we respond to a cosmic reset, a planetary upheaval beyond our control? Looking at the big five extinctions, one fact stands out. Life moves on, regardless of the past. The Earth, in its vastness, doesn't care about the civilizations that have come and gone. It continues its eternal dance, indifferent to the rise and fall of species. This realization forces us to confront the sobering truth. No civilization, no matter how advanced, can be certain that it will not be the next to be swept away by the tides of time. Its remnants could be lost beneath oceans, mountains, or the crushing weight of history itself, never to be found. In the blink of a geological eye, a civilization could disappear, its cities, monuments, and technologies swallowed by the very forces that have shaped the Earth. Yet, just as life has rebounded in the aftermath of previous extinctions, the planet will continue its journey, erasing the footprints of those who came before. Perhaps, in the distant future, only the faintest whispers of our existence will remain, like shadows on the wind. This raises an unsettling question. If humanity were to vanish, how would future explorers, perhaps a species not unlike us, know that we ever existed? Would they too ask the same questions we ask now, pondering the lost civilizations that once inhabited this planet? Would they wonder how something so advanced could simply disappear? And if they do uncover traces of us, how would they interpret our legacy? Would they understand the complexities of our culture and technology, or would they be left to piece together fragments, never truly comprehending the vastness of what we achieved? The thought lingers. If we were to face such a future, could we leave behind a legacy that might endure long after we are gone? A message encoded in the stars, perhaps, or written in the very bones of the Earth itself? And if future civilizations do manage to decipher our remains, what might they learn from us? Would they see our triumphs and mistakes as a cautionary tale, or would they too be doomed to repeat the same errors? As we ponder this, a more immediate concern emerges. Is our history already slipping away, unnoticed by us as the relentless passage of time erases the records we have left behind? We live in an age where our technological advancements are built on fragile infrastructure, digital records, complex systems of information that could vanish in an instant. What happens when time, that ever-present force, begins to erode the very foundation of our civilization? If we were to look back just 10,000 years, a mere blink in the grand scheme of Earth's history, we would find a world unrecognizable to us today. And yet, in that tiny sliver of time, civilizations arose, thrived, and disappeared. How much of their legacy remains? What traces of their achievements can we still find? In the case of modern cities like New York, bustling with life and energy, it is hard to imagine that one day this metropolis might fade into nothingness. Skyscrapers would crumble, roads would crack and vanish, and the very foundation of human civilization might be swallowed by time. But if geologists of the future were to unearth what remains, would they know what they were looking at? Could they decipher the remnants of our civilization? Or would they stand in confusion, unsure of how something so advanced could have disappeared? The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, yet, in the context of deep time, this notion begins to break down. The records we've left behind, whether in digital archives or physical artifacts, may not survive. Much like a treasure chest buried beneath layers of shifting sand, our history could remain hidden, only to be uncovered when the conditions are right. This is the challenge that future geologists might face. They might look at the ruins of our cities and wonder how something so advanced could simply vanish. Without the traces of technology, the digital archives, or even the very bones of our species, they might be left to question whether we ever existed at all. And so we are left with a profound mystery. What will remain of us, if anything, in the great sweep of time? Will future civilizations uncover our story, or will they too be left to wonder about the lost ages that came before? If future scientists, centuries or even millennia from now, were to stand on the very same streets we tread today, they would search for any signs, however faint, that humanity once existed on this planet. In a world stripped by time, with only the faintest remnants of our civilization to be found, What could they piece together about us? The evidence might be minimal, perhaps just a thin layer of sediment layered over fragmented artifacts, too small, too delicate to survive the relentless erosion of time. They might stumble upon a lone stone tablet inscribed with ancient symbols, or the decayed ruins of a once proud structure, its walls crumbled into dust. But without the living context of our civilization, how could they decipher the meaning of these remains? What story could they reconstruct from the shadows of our past? How much of our history would slip through their fingers like grains of sand, lost forever before they even realized what was slipping away? And then there's the paradox at the heart of our technological legacy. On the surface, our creations seem enduring. Our skyscrapers of steel and glass, our gadgets of plastic and metal, durable enough to last, perhaps for centuries, if not longer. Yet, when viewed through the lens of deep time, can we truly expect them to endure? Steel and glass may be formidable in the short term, but the relentless forces of erosion, earthquakes, and the gradual degradation of all things will take their toll. How will future explorers make sense of what once was an advanced civilization? A civilization that communicated across the globe, that reached for the stars, that reshaped the earth itself with its innovation and power. Even the oceans, with their mysterious depths, might hold pieces of our civilization preserved in their sediment. Could entire cities lie beneath the ocean's surface, hidden in plain sight, waiting for future explorers to discover them? Perhaps our most advanced technologies, our plastics and metals, will sink into the deep, resting there for millennia, untouched by time, yet impervious to the passage of ages. The idea that humanity's legacy might one day be unearthed like the remains of a sunken ship lying dormant at the ocean's bottom is a hauntingly possible future. Even in the boundless timeline of Earth's history, a few centuries, or even a few millennia, are but the briefest of moments. So while we may wonder if our civilization is destined to vanish without a trace, we must also ask, how long will our imprint last? What could we leave behind to prove we were here, if not monuments of stone or towering spires of metal? The answer might be subtler than we expect. Perhaps instead of physical structures, our legacy will be found in the changing patterns of the atmosphere, in the subtle shifts of climate, or even in the very genetic makeup of the organisms that share this planet with us. Our genetic fingerprint, an alteration in the course of a species' evolution, could be the lasting trace of our existence, a whisper to future generations of beings who may study these changes long after we've faded away. It may be something so minuscule, so seamlessly integrated into the fabric of life itself, that it will be a quiet but undeniable reminder that we once walked this earth. This prompts an even more profound question. Can it be that human history, with all its achievements, its art, its buildings, its machines, could vanish in a geological instant, leaving only the faintest of traces, if anything at all? Could we be like the civilizations that came before us, vanishing into the ether, leaving behind nothing but dust scattered through the ages? This thought challenges our very concept of permanence, urging us to reconsider what it truly means to exist and to be remembered. As we contemplate this possibility, we must also turn our gaze inward. What were the conditions that allowed for the rise of intelligence and civilization in the first place? What factors gave birth to complex thought, language, and technological progress? How many other civilizations, perhaps even older than ours, might have risen and fallen without leaving a single record behind? This leads us into an even deeper exploration. What are the essential conditions for intelligence to emerge in the first place? Could it be that intelligence is not an inevitable outcome of evolution, but rather a rare, fragile phenomenon? An accidental bloom in the long storied history of Earth, a product of specific and perhaps not so common circumstances. And if that's the case, then could the rise of intelligence be a fleeting gift, one that might vanish just as quickly as it arrived, wiped away by the next great catastrophe, as so many things in the natural world eventually are? These questions are not just theoretical. They beckon us to reflect on the nature of intelligence itself, and whether it is truly as universal as we like to think. Evolution is not a directed process. It is not geared toward achieving intelligence or complexity. It is driven by survival. Over billions of years, the Earth has witnessed countless species evolve and thrive without ever needing the type of intelligence we prize in ourselves. Crocodiles, sharks, ferns, these life forms have remained largely unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, not because they are stagnant, but because they are effective. Evolution is not a straight path leading to more intelligence, but a winding journey that adapts each species to its particular ecological niche. Most species evolve traits that enhance survival, stronger jaws, quicker reflexes, better reproductive strategies, without ever developing the reflective consciousness that defines human thought. So, what does this mean for the future of intelligence? Perhaps it is not as inevitable as we assume. Perhaps it is merely a blip in the vast timeline of life on Earth. Imagine the evolutionary tree of life as a vast river, meandering through time, each fork representing a new adaptation. Most of these branches wind off into perfectly effective forms of life, each adapted to its environment. But then there's that one small twig, that barely noticeable bend, that led to symbolic reasoning, language, art, and the creation of cities. How many other branches like this one almost made it, but didn't? How many species had the potential for intelligence, but never reached it? Evolution is not driven by a desire for complexity, but by the simple need to survive. So what pushes a species to go beyond mere survival and develop the ability to build tools, to shape stone, to think about the stars? Once a species begins using tools, some argue intelligence becomes a runaway feedback loop. Tools make survival easier, which frees up time for more tools, which leads to greater intelligence. However, not every tool-using species evolves a culture, and not all cultures lead to cities. Many of the greatest civilizations in history were built on materials that simply do not preserve in the fossil record. Soft tissues, wooden structures, oral traditions, and entire mythologies that vanished without leaving a trace. A civilization built entirely from biodegradable materials could rise, flourish, and fall without leaving so much as a chemical trace behind. Even in our own age, with our concrete and steel, we might one day be reduced to a faint spike of carbon and some strange isotopes buried deep in the earth. So if intelligence is not a guarantee, and if it's not the end goal of evolution, but a rare and fleeting result, could it have happened before? Could there have been another intelligent species that emerged long before us, under completely different conditions, only to vanish without a trace? This brings us to an even more speculative, yet intriguing question. If there were another intelligent species that once lived on Earth, how would we even begin to search for their remains? What form might they have taken? What epoch nurtured them? Were they like us, or completely different in their ways of thinking, their values, their creations? Imagine walking through a dense, ancient forest, but this forest is not filled with trees. It is filled with possibilities. Possibilities of minds that once thought, communicated, remembered, perhaps even dreamed, but left behind no trace to speak for them. No monuments, no satellites, not even a scratch on a fossilized bone to say, I was here. As we peel back the layers of Earth's long, restless history, a question quietly lingers. Were we truly the first to wonder? If intelligence is not always shaped like ours, how would we even know it ever existed? Let's take, for example, the case of the dinosaurs. For 160 million years, they ruled the Earth. It is a reign that far surpasses our brief moment in time. While most dinosaurs are believed to have been driven by instinct rather than insight, some, like the troodontids, had relatively large brains, forward-facing eyes, and grasping hands. Had the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs missed its target, might their evolutionary path have twisted toward complexity? Toward technology? It's a question that sparks the imagination. Could there have been a Dino sapiens? A creature with scaly fingers crafting tools, building shelters, perhaps even contemplating the stars? It sounds like science fiction, yet it's not a matter of imagination, but of opportunity. Intelligence, after all, needs more than just neurons. It needs time, pressure, and the right conditions to thrive. The age of dinosaurs offered all of these. But even if such a species emerged, where are their echoes? Could their bones or tools have survived 60 million years of geological forces? And if they had started to tread the path of reason, might they have stalled at one critical juncture? The lack of collaboration. Human cognition is deeply social. Our intelligence was not sculpted in solitude. but in tribes, in stories, in the sharing of knowledge. So the real question is, who else has ever combined a capable mind with the capacity to build something greater than itself? For that, we turn our gaze toward the oceans. In the dark, alien depths of the oceans live the octopuses. They are not the most obvious candidates for a past civilization, soft-bodied, short-lived, with no cities or languages as we understand them. But their intelligence is fascinating. They solve problems, mimic other species, and even escape from enclosures in ways that seem intentional. What makes octopus intelligence so intriguing is not just what they do, but how they do it. Their brains are distributed with 2/3 of their neurons residing in their arms. Each tentacle, in a sense, has its own mind. They are a living example of decentralization. Yet this intelligence is tragically fleeting. Octopuses live alone, and they die young. With lifespans often no longer than a year or two, they cannot pass down wisdom, build culture, or accumulate knowledge. If civilization requires continuity, then the octopus represents brilliant sparks of intelligence that never had the chance to grow into steady flames. But not all non-human intelligence fades so quickly. Consider birds. Some species, like crows and parrots, rival primates in their ability to solve problems and use tools. They remember human faces, hold grudges, and even teach their young how to fish with twigs. Was it biology that held them back from developing a civilization? Or was it something else? Something like fingers or fire? These examples remind us that intelligence is not a single ladder with humans perched at the top. It is a vast, sprawling landscape with countless divergent paths. Some species build, others feel, some remember, others plan. Only one, so far, has built machines. But in the vast history of life on Earth, who is to say that we are the only ones who have ever reached the threshold of intelligence? Only time will tell. During the Permian and Triassic periods, long before mammals came to dominate the Earth, it was the reptiles who reigned supreme. But these weren't the slow-moving, cold-blooded creatures we often picture today. No, these reptiles were fierce, adaptable, and remarkably diverse. They weren't simply survivors of a pre-mammalian world. They were innovators, carving out new ecological niches with an astonishing range of strategies. Among them were the Arosaurs, whose legacy would later give rise to both the towering dinosaurs and the flying birds. There were also the Therapsids, a group of mammal-like reptiles with complex, differentiated teeth, and possibly even the ability to regulate their body temperature, suggesting they might have had some form of warm-bloodedness. Could it be that one of these early reptilian lines, now lost to time, dabbled in the first stirrings of intelligence? That within the lush swamps or the arid highlands of the ancient Earth, some of these creatures began to form rudimentary societies, communicate in a primitive proto-language, or craft simple tools from stone and bone? Their world was anything but stable. It was an era marked by violent climate shifts, mass extinctions, and the constant reshaping of the Earth's surface by tectonic activity. Any evidence of such early forms of civilization might have been buried under layers of volcanic ash or sediment, lost to the ravages of time. Fossils from this era are scarce and often fragmented, which leaves us with little more than fleeting glimpses of these long-gone creatures. It's entirely possible that a civilization, or at least something approaching it, could have briefly flared into existence tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, only to leave no trace that we would recognize today. But we should be cautious before we draw conclusions. This isn't an argument for certainty. It's an invitation to approach the past with humility. We tend to think of ourselves as the culmination of evolution, the pinnacle of a vast unfolding process. But what if we're not the end of the story at all? What if we're simply one branch on a gnarled, ancient tree of life? What if, in the deep, shadowed reaches of time, evolution gave rise to minds far different from our own, minds that never left a trace? And what if most of those minds were extinguished before we even had a chance to notice? As we explore these possibilities, a new view of intelligence begins to emerge. Instead of thinking of it as a unique, almost miraculous trait reserved for humans, we might begin to see it as a phenomenon that can rise and fall like the tides. Given enough time, the right conditions, and perhaps a bit of luck, intelligence might emerge in many forms, ebbing and flowing across the vast ocean of evolutionary history. In this view, Civilization is less a singular achievement and more of a rare pattern that might repeat itself under the right circumstances. It is, perhaps, not an exception, but a potentiality that exists within the reach of many species, if only the conditions are right. And this brings us to the most fascinating minds of all. Minds so different from our own, yet strangely familiar. Minds that drift through the ocean's depths, change color as they think, and solve complex problems without uttering a single word. As we turn our attention to the world of cephalopods, we plunge deeper, both literally and metaphorically, into the mysteries of the deep mind. In the ink-black depths of the ocean, where sunlight fades into myth and crushing pressure eliminates all but the most resilient life forms, there exists a remarkable intelligence that exists outside the realm of our typical understanding. These creatures, octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish, live in a world utterly alien to us. Their minds are not like our own. They are not warm-blooded, nor are they social in the way that we understand social structures. They are not bound by bones, nor do they possess a centralized brain like ours, and yet they demonstrate behaviors that defy the usual boundaries of cognition. They solve puzzles, slip through mazes, and manipulate their environment in subtle, deliberate ways. These creatures have been observed carrying coconut shells, using them as portable shelters, much like nomads dragging tents across the seafloor. The sheer strangeness of their intelligence, its eerie independence, raises a question that lingers in the back of our minds. What might they become, given more time? If cephalopods lived longer, if their minds had more generations to evolve and build upon themselves, could they have reached for something more than instinct and adaptation? Could they have developed civilization? When we imagine civilization, we often envision it as a world of stone and fire, of towering buildings, written language, and smoke rising from bustling cities. But what if civilization could take shape in a world where fire could not be kindled, where metal could not be smelted, and where permanence was constantly undermined by the forces of water and erosion? The ocean is such a place, a world without embers or clay, where even the most fundamental technologies of human civilization, like the wheel, have little use. And yet, it would be the height of human arrogance to assume that intelligence must always follow the same path we did. Cephalopods don't stack stones into monuments, but they sculpt their camouflage with an astonishing level of precision, controlling their skin pigment with pixel-perfect accuracy. They don't forge tools in a workshop, but they repurpose their surroundings with a deliberate and creative intent. If an intelligent species had emerged beneath the waves millions of years before us, what would they have left behind? Could there be ruins buried deep in the ocean's vast expanses? Or would everything, tools, shelters, symbols, have been washed away by time, dissolved by the relentless action of the saltwater? In this regard, we encounter a peculiar silence. The ocean, it seems, is both a cradle and a grave for memory. It preserves some things for eons, like the teeth of ancient sharks, but it erases others almost immediately. Unlike dry land, where artifacts can fossilize and fire can bake clay into permanence, the deep sea is an unforgiving archivist. If an oceanic civilization had ever existed, built from organic materials or coral dwellings, would we even know? Could we recognize the signs of a civilization that never smelted ore, never carved stone, and never sent smoke signals into the sky? What if their intelligence, their culture, remained internal, abstract, fleeting, passed on from one short-lived generation to the next in the form of behavior, ritual, or even bioluminescent communication? Science fiction has long toyed with such ideas, imagining ancient aquatic civilizations that didn't build cities or craft monuments, but instead developed vast, intricate minds through collective memory encoded in DNA or passed down through subtle behavioral mimicry. In other tales, these civilizations never advanced beyond a quiet, mysterious equilibrium with the ocean, content in their own existence. Both scenarios are equally haunting, both whisper to us from the edges of plausibility. And yet, there is another question, a deeply unsettling one, that arises from our contemplation of cephalopods. If these creatures are so intelligent, why didn't they go further? What stopped them from reaching beyond their own instincts, from creating something greater? Was it their biology, the environment? Or perhaps it was the lack of time, a brief evolutionary experiment cut short by the chaotic rhythms of the Earth itself. Cephalopods have experienced fluctuating populations over geological time, sometimes flourishing, other times nearly disappearing. During the Cretaceous period, enormous cephalopods swam alongside the marine reptiles, their giant forms cutting through the seas. Could one branch of cephalopods have begun to evolve in a different direction, one that was never allowed to fully develop? In some ways, their story serves as a reminder that intelligence alone may not be enough. Without the right conditions, without longevity, community, and continuity, even the brightest minds may never break free of their biological limitations. The flickering light of a deep mind might never become a blazing flame. And yet, this idea persists. If evolution had a second chance, if the impacts of asteroid strikes and sudden climate shifts were avoided, could an oceanic species have risen, not to build monuments and cities, but to create, to communicate, and to organize in ways that we can barely imagine? Perhaps their civilization would not be one of bricks and bronze, but one based on biosignals, on collaborative memory passed along like songs through the currents of the ocean. If such a culture had once existed, it would force us to reconsider everything we know about civilization and progress. It would challenge our assumptions not only about what constitutes a society, but about what it means to evolve. Perhaps these creatures didn't fail. Perhaps they simply followed a different rhythm, one that we were never meant to hear. Before we venture too deeply into the ocean's depths, exploring its myriad secrets, another current pulls us upward toward the land where the passage of time has given rise not only to biological wonders, but to something more elusive, something uniquely human. Culture. For while intelligence on its own may flare brightly and then dim, culture is the thread that allows the flickering spark of thought to be passed across generations, slowly building something much larger than any single life could contain. But how exactly does culture shape the course of evolution? How do ideas, abstract, invisible things, begin to steer the trajectory of a species? It's a question that takes us away from biology alone and into the realm of something profoundly different. Let's step onto that shoreline, just at the edge of human history. Throughout Earth's shifting epochs, intelligence has never been the sole factor in determining whether a species persists. Consider, for instance, the octopus or the raven. Both are clever creatures capable of problem-solving, planning, even showing signs of creativity. Yet, without something more, these flashes of brilliance do not lead to lasting legacies. They flicker briefly and fade away. The crucial element that enables a species to transcend mere survival is not just intelligence, but the continuity of thought passed down through culture. Intelligence is the spark. Culture is the dry tinder in which that spark ignites and spreads. Among the many brilliant minds across the animal kingdom, we find creatures like the chimpanzee, which may learn to use a stick to fish for termites. But without a system to pass on this knowledge, without a way to build upon it, refine it, and integrate it into larger traditions, this moment of insight will fade away. Intelligence left untransmitted is like writing on water. It leaves a ripple that quickly disappears. Culture, on the other hand, is like the ink that lets ideas persist and accumulate over time, like layers of sediment forming a bedrock of collective knowledge. This cultural continuity has profound implications for the evolution of a species. A human child born today doesn't have to invent the wheel again. They inherit millennia of accumulated wisdom, tools, language, customs, beliefs, art, and myth, passed down through countless generations. Culture transforms isolated individuals into a collective mind, a vast web of knowledge and memory that stretches far beyond the span of any single life. It binds us together across time, allowing the ideas of yesterday to shape the future. Yet for all its power, this leap from intelligence to culture is far from inevitable. It's a rare thing. Could there have been other intelligent creatures in Earth's deep past, beings that displayed curiosity and creative minds, but lacked the cultural scaffolding to build anything lasting? Could there have been civilizations that flickered into existence, brilliant but ephemeral, leaving no trace in the fossil record? This tension between raw intelligence and sustained cultural momentum is one of the greatest gambles of evolution. It is a delicate balance, one that must be maintained for progress to endure. In the early history of humanity, this dynamic was particularly fragile. Homo sapiens existed for tens of thousands of years before the dawn of agriculture, writing, or complex cities. For much of our existence, we were just another clever ape, no different from other species in the struggle to survive. But something shifted. What triggered the surge of cultural innovation that would eventually give rise to civilizations? Some anthropologists point to the development of symbolic thought, the ability to convey ideas through symbols, to represent the abstract, and to link those representations across time. With this new form of communication, culture became self-sustaining. Thought could leap across generations, fueling progress in ways that biology alone could never achieve. Still, even with the emergence of symbolic thought, intelligence does not guarantee the development of culture. Imagine a species with sharp reasoning, problem-solving abilities, and creativity, but with no stable family structures, no long-term communal upbringing, and no extended period for the young to learn from the wisdom of their elders. Evolution may have thrown the dice many times and failed to land on a species with the right conditions for cultural transmission. The path to civilization, it turns out, is anything but certain. Cultural evolution is strange in that it is not strictly tied to biological evolution. Yes, culture builds on biology, but it can leap far beyond physical limitations. Take the elephant, for example. While it cannot fly, imagine if it had a culture that passed down the blueprints for flight, knowledge of materials, methods, and metaphors. In time, it might build machines that could soar through the skies, despite its biological constraints. Biological evolution is slow, shaping life across eons, carving adaptations in the same way rivers carve canyons. Cultural evolution, on the other hand, is fast, exponential, and often unpredictable. It races ahead, compressing time itself. But that rapid progress comes at a price. Unlike genes, which are locked into the body, culture is fragile. It depends on memory, continuity, and trust. Civilizations rise and fall not just because of physical factors, but because of ideas lost, languages forgotten, rituals abandoned, and knowledge erased. One book burned, one teacher silenced, one tradition lost. Cultural progress can unravel in an instant, faster than DNA can mutate, and far quicker than the slow roll of evolution. It is in this fragility that the great question arises. Could other civilizations have existed in the distant past? Civilizations that we will never find, because they didn't last long enough to leave a mark? Perhaps there were intelligent species before us, beings whose minds burned brightly and fiercely, but who never built cities, never crafted tools, never left traces for us to uncover. Their voices may have echoed through time, but only for a brief moment, and then they were silenced. The records they left behind may be as intangible as a whisper in the wind. This leads us to a humbling realization. Civilization may not be the inevitable result of intelligence. It may, in fact, be an incredibly fragile accident. It's possible that the complex structures of society, the skyscrapers, the satellites, the symphonies, are not the predictable products of brain power, but the outcomes of a unique alignment of social structures, symbolic tools, and crucially, timing. Had one of these elements been absent in our past, we too might have remained in the forests, clever yet unremembered. It is the fragile nature of civilization that raises a haunting question. Are we overlooking the traces of ancient intelligence? Could there have been creatures whose minds were sharp and intricate, yet who never built tools or constructed cities? These minds may have evolved along paths we cannot yet fathom, intelligent, perceptive, self-aware, but without leaving the tangible artifacts that we associate with intelligence. Perhaps intelligence in its broadest sense is not always about constructing monuments or building machines. Perhaps true intelligence can exist without leaving a trace in the physical world. This opens up a radical thought. What if memory itself could persist without the need for visible technology? What if consciousness, perception, and self-awareness could evolve in ways that left no architectural imprint? Could there be minds from ancient epochs whose thoughts and ideas pass down in ways we cannot yet comprehend? It's a sobering reminder that intelligence is not always about what we build, but about what we remember. And memory, in its deepest sense, requires more than just neurons. It requires culture, a shared continuity of thought that transcends individual lifespans and persists long after the individual is gone. But What if that isn't the only way it could have unfolded? What if the most intelligent beings in Earth's deep history gazed up at the stars, deciphered the mysteries of the universe, pondered existence and death, and simply chose, perhaps even deliberately, not to build a single machine? Before our ancestors shaped steel or cultivated crops, they lived as nomads for tens of thousands of years, wandering the landscapes without settling. They etched symbols into stone, mourned their dead, spun tales, and perhaps even dreamed of gods. Yet, despite the vastness of their inner lives, their mark on the planet was remarkably light, so subtle in fact that if it weren't for us, modern humans, digging up their bones and flint tools, so much of their existence might have simply faded away. Intelligence, it turns out, isn't always enough to leave a lasting footprint on the planet. We tend to think of intelligence as something that inevitably leads to civilization, stone cities, intricate machines, sprawling metropolises. But in reality, intelligence can exist without transforming the world around it. Take, for example, a species skilled in tracking animals, in understanding nature with profound depth, sharing oral traditions rich in meaning. Such beings would be no less human, no less intelligent, but they may never have felt the need or the pressure to embark on the path that leads to industrial civilization. Could it be that millions of years ago, another species evolved in a world free from the environmental pressures that pushed Homo sapiens toward agriculture, cities, and complex technologies? Perhaps this species lived in harmony with its environment, whether in the ocean or in the forests, with no need to extract surplus from nature or dominate landscapes. Why build anything when nature provides everything you need? It's all too easy to view civilization as the inevitable result of intelligence. The rise of stone cities and later silicon chips seem like the logical fruit of an evolutionary process, a sign of progress. Yet, civilization might not be the peak of intelligence after all. It might be more of a detour, an adaptive response to very specific pressures. Droughts that pushed early humans to cultivate grains, the domestication of herd animals, the scarcity of fuel that led to innovations in energy. These are the kinds of pressures that ignited the birth of civilization. In this sense, civilization is less about reaching an intellectual summit and more about reacting to necessity. And necessity, as it turns out, may not be a universal condition. Across Earth's vast history, it's entirely possible that other intelligent species never crossed the threshold from being highly aware, highly capable beings to developing technology. Intelligence can be incredibly useful without ever needing to lead to the construction of tools or cities. It can help a species evade predators, cooperate in hunts, form cohesive communities, and navigate complex social dynamics. But if the environment is rich and abundant, the need to innovate, to shape the world through technology, may simply never arise. Consider the octopus, a creature that demonstrates remarkable intelligence through puzzle solving, mimicry, even play. But the octopus, with its short lifespan and soft body, is unlikely to pass on its knowledge or develop tools, let alone form a complex, lasting civilization. Now, imagine a creature with similar intellectual prowess, but longer lived, perhaps a reptile or another species that has evolved to endure for millennia. Such a being might possess the intellect to understand the world, but perhaps lacks the urge to alter it. Why would it, if everything it needed was already provided by nature? In science fiction, we often imagine extraterrestrial civilizations as grand, sprawling empires, cities in the clouds, or machines that fuse with flesh. But what if the truly alien civilization is one that never builds? What if instead of machines, language, ritual, gesture, and gaze are the primary modes of communication? What if, rather than reshaping the world around them, this species blends into it, lives in harmony with it, and exists as a civilization of minds rather than machines? This idea challenges our conventional understanding of what it means to be advanced. We tend to measure progress by the artifacts left behind, pottery, metal tools, towering skyscrapers, but perhaps there have been entire epochs of intelligence that left behind no such material legacy. Instead, they may have left whispers, decisions not to dig, to avoid altering the landscape, to honor the untouched. Could an ancient species, millions of years ago, have looked at the Earth not as something to dominate, but as something to live in balance with? And if so, what traces would they have left behind? No roads, no plastics, no layers of sediment from industrial activity. Perhaps their legacy is so subtle that it might only be detectable in the fossil record, in tiny traces of chemical signatures left behind in the soil, or perhaps even in the very isotope ratios preserved in ancient rocks. The possibility exists that such a species may have left no fossilized bones at all, particularly if they lived in forests or oceans, places where organic matter is often lost to time. Perhaps, like whispers, their presence would fade entirely, leaving behind only faint geological anomalies. A curious isotope ratio, a shift in atmospheric composition, these could be the only remnants, the faintest of echoes from a civilization that never built, never shaped, never left the monumental signatures we associate with advancement. This possibility is, in many ways, humbling. It suggests that we may not be the first intelligent life to walk or swim across the Earth. We may be the first, however, to leave behind the monuments of our thought, steel, circuitry, and machines. Intelligence, as it turns out, doesn't always crave conquest. Sometimes it listens, blends, and adapts instead of reshapes. But in the silence of such a civilization, there is a problem. In a world where tectonic plates move and oceans rise and fall, what survives long enough to tell a story? What, if anything, would remain to prove our existence 100 million years from now? Would future generations even know we were here? Or would we, too, become a ghost species, another enigma buried in the stone? Not all ghosts rattle chains or wear sheets. Some are formed from plastic, etched into stone, or buried in the slow chemistry of the earth. If humanity were to vanish tomorrow, what would our legacy be? Not in terms of culture or memory, but in matter. What would the Earth's silent language say about us in its layers of sediment and fossilized silence? What traces would we leave behind 100 million years from now? The thought of this, of a future so far distant that continents have drifted, oceans reshaped, and entire mountain ranges have risen and fallen, is almost surreal. In that distant future, might a discarded plastic bottle or the skeleton of a skyscraper remain, the only remnants of a once great civilization? Time, after all, has a way of reducing even the most monumental creations to dust. Most human-made artifacts aren't designed to survive even a few centuries without care, let alone withstand the pressures of time, heat, and tectonic forces for millions of years. Yet in this grinding process, some things might persist, not as grand monuments, but as subtle signals. Consider plastic. The synthetic polymers that wrap our food, form our clothing, and float through our oceans have only existed for a brief moment in geological time. And yet, unlike organic materials, they don't biodegrade. Instead, they fragment into tiny microplastics, seeping into the soil, water, and even animal tissue. In the distant future, landfills buried beneath layers of sediment might become the birthplace of new hybrid stones, plastic conglomerates formed from both synthetic polymers and natural materials. An alien paleontologist, or perhaps a future Earth dweller with no memory of humanity, might one day crack open a cliffside and wonder about the origins of these strange plastic fossils. But plastics are just one of many subtle whispers in the deep time record. The atmospheric carbon levels we've altered since the Industrial Revolution provide another clue. Billions of tons of carbon dioxide have been pumped into the air, dramatically changing the chemical balance of the planet's atmosphere. If Earth were a book, this would be a bold underline and an unmistakable punctuation mark. Future geologists, upon examining rock layers, could identify this carbon spike as a unique anomaly in the isotopic ratios of carbon-12 and carbon-13. It's a subtle change, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. The paleontological record of past events, such as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which occurred 56 million years ago and was driven by volcanic activity and methane release, shows similar signatures. What we are leaving behind may not be seen for millennia, but its presence is undeniable. But imagine this. What if 100 million years from now, a team of geologists were to stumble upon an anomaly in the Earth's layers, one that pointed directly to the era of human civilization? How would they interpret this strange signature left behind by a species long since vanished? In addition to the telltale rise in carbon levels, a wealth of other chemical markers would mark the time of our industrial age. There would be spikes in nitrogen, indicating the use of fertilizers to fuel crop production. There would be traces of heavy metals, byproducts of mining and manufacturing. Radioactive isotopes, the remnants of nuclear testing, would persist like scars across the planet's surface. These markers wouldn't be random or scattered, as if left by some passing storm. No, they would be signatures of profound planetary scale changes, the kind that are etched deeply into the geological record, leaving behind a fingerprint pressed into the stone of time. And yet, the true measure of our legacy might not lie in the chemicals alone, but in the very toll taken on life itself. Earth's history is punctuated by the abrupt, brutal disappearances of entire ecosystems, mass extinctions that punctuate the slow unfolding of geological time, like exclamation marks on a long, drifting sentence. Perhaps the most famous of these cataclysmic events is the sudden disappearances of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, which is marked by a distinct layer of iridium, a rare element typically associated with meteorites. The asteroid impact that struck the Earth then left its mark in a way that has captured the collective imagination for generations. But what about us? In the absence of a giant asteroid, we are witnessing a similar unraveling, albeit one that's human-caused. The world's ecosystems are in free fall. Entire species are disappearing at an alarming rate. The very diversity of life, which once flourished across every corner of the planet, is shrinking in real time as humans alter the balance of nature at an unprecedented pace. This biological thinning could, too, become a layer in the Earth's fossil record, a sudden dramatic drop in variety, like a wave of sameness sweeping away the chaotic richness of life that preceded it. Future scientists might pore over the remains of this time and be bewildered by the disappearance of amphibians, insects, corals, and birds. They might note the rapid rise of domesticated species, cattle, chickens, dogs, and the equally sudden collapse of these species in the wake of civilization's fall. It might appear at first glance like a sudden extinction event, a biological equivalent to an orchestra coming to a sudden, jarring halt midway through a symphony. Imagine it, a world where the diversity of life vanishes from the Earth, leaving behind only the remnants of those species we domesticated, our genetic legacy of herding and farming. And then there's the question of our cities, the towering monuments of steel and concrete that we believe to be eternal, indestructible in our own lifetimes. These cities, however, are incredibly fragile when measured against the deep, unyielding passage of geological time. Without constant maintenance, even the most impressive skyscrapers begin to crumble within mere centuries. The rebar inside rusts, the concrete cracks. Over time, the towering structures that once seemed indestructible collapse and are eventually buried beneath the weight of sediment, forests, or seas. Yet in certain environments, like deserts, floodplains, or volcanic ash, portions of these buildings might fossilize. Foundations could leave strange geometric imprints in future rocks, a silent testimony to the civilization that once stood there. New York City, for example, might one day be remembered not for its shimmering glass and neon lights, but for the pattern of right angles pressed into ancient clay, a map of human ambition and achievement buried beneath layers of rock. The story doesn't end here, though. Even our satellites, those artificial moons that circle the Earth, will one day fall. Orbit, like everything else, is not forever. Over the span of millennia, our carefully placed satellites will decay and re-enter Earth's atmosphere in blazing arcs of fire. Some will vaporize completely, leaving no trace. Others, however, like old probes that have journeyed to the Moon or Mars, might remain untouched, locked in the cold embrace of space, silent, forgotten relics of a time when humans reached for the stars. On Earth, some fragments of these satellites may survive their fiery re-entry, embedding themselves in the crust like high-tech meteorites. These too could become part of the geological record, an artifact of human ingenuity and the quest for knowledge. Taken as a whole, these markers, plastics, carbon spikes, mass extinctions, synthetic alloys, form what many scientists now refer to as the Anthropocene layer. A thin slice in the Earth's geological timeline, yet one that is sharply distinct from all that came before it. If the Earth's history were a massive library of stone, this would be the bookmarked page, crisp, recent, and deeply strange. And as we contemplate this layer, it raises a fascinating and unsettling possibility. What if there were other industrial civilizations long before us that rose and fell in the deep past? Would they have left behind similar markers, carbon anomalies, a die-off of species, strange metals or plastics, or their equivalent? If so, could we recognize their fingerprints in the rock record? Would future geologists examining these layers be able to discern that an intelligent civilization once existed, perhaps millions of years before humans, in an era when the Earth was governed by creatures completely different from those we know today? The idea is both humbling and disorienting. It suggests that civilization as we understand it may be far more fragile than we care to admit. But its echoes, its ghost, might linger far longer than we expect. Not in towering monuments or statues, but in the soil's chemical whispers, in the bones of animals we never intended to erase, and in the rocks that remember everything. If we wish to know whether humanity is truly unique in the history of intelligent life, or whether we are merely the latest chapter in a much older story, we must learn how to read the Earth's long memory more closely. And that means examining the geological fingerprints of industry, tracing the chemical imprints left behind by our civilization, and asking ourselves, what might these signals truly reveal? Beneath our feet lies a time machine, one that doesn't hum with mechanical energy or gleam with chrome, but simply waits. It's not a futuristic contraption of wires and screens, but an archive, slow and silent, recording the history of life on Earth. Over the course of millions of years, the rock record has preserved the Earth's oldest memories. But not all of these memories are written in fossilized bones or the remnants of ancient organisms. Some are far more subtle. Burn marks left in the air, unnatural molecules woven into the soil, invisible scars etched into the very chemistry of the oceans. These are the fingerprints of industry, and they will linger long after we are gone. Imagine a world 1,000,000 years from now, a world in recovery after humanity has vanished from the face of the earth. Forests stretch where once thriving cities stood. Rivers carve new paths through streets that are now nothing more than forgotten ruins. On the surface, it may seem as though humanity never existed at all. But dig deep enough, and the illusion begins to fade. Among the most telling signs of our time will be the traces left by combustion. The burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, has released carbon into the atmosphere at an unprecedented rate, and future geologists will surely see this spike in the rock layers, like a flare signaling a dramatic shift in the planet's climate. They won't just find carbon, they'll find the altered isotopic ratios of the atmosphere, the chemical imprint left by the burning of ancient organic material. This signature, as distinct as a fingerprint on glass, will be embedded in ice cores and ocean sediments, a reminder of a civilization that lived and burned. But combustion is only part of the story. There's also the legacy of the synthetic compounds we've created, molecules that don't exist in nature, that wouldn't be here if not for human ingenuity. Pesticides, flame retardants, refrigerants, and pharmaceuticals, all of these chemicals resist degradation. They cling to the soil for millennia, long after the ecosystems they were meant to control have disappeared. These ghost molecules will likely outlast our buildings, our books, and even our bones. Over time, they will become part of the soil, layer by layer, season by season. And unlike natural compounds, many of these synthetic chemicals have no biological breakdown pathways. They don't rot or decay. They simply stay, waiting to be discovered or misinterpreted by some distant civilization trying to decode the Earth's past. The oceans, too, have been silent witnesses to the rise and fall of our civilization. As we burned fuels and reshaped the landscape, we released not only carbon into the atmosphere, but nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals into the seas. The oceans, once a balanced and self-regulating system, began absorbing more than they could handle. The acidification of the oceans is not a metaphor. It's a measurable chemical shift, one that future scientists could detect in the sediments of the seafloor. The pH levels of the oceans dropped, and organisms that once relied on stable chemical conditions, shell-building plankton, corals, began to struggle. This shift, subtle though it may seem, could leave its own geological mark, one that future geologists will likely be able to trace through the disappearing species and the changing chemical composition of marine life. It might be a mark of environmental distress, a reminder of the cost of progress. And then there are the traces of the heavy metals we extracted from the earth: mercury, lead, cadmium, elements that were once deep within the Earth's crust but were mined to fuel our technologies. Over time, they washed into rivers, into the oceans, and eventually into the sedimentary layers of the Earth. Future researchers may puzzle over these elevated concentrations of metals, trying to determine their significance. Did they point to a war, a planetary catastrophe, or simply to a civilization blind to the long-term cost of progress? These marks, smudges on the geological manuscript, won't tell the full story, but they will hint at the intelligence, the ambition, and perhaps the folly of the civilization that once thrived here. They'll suggest that something happened, something human, something artificial. And perhaps one day, future civilizations will look back at the fossilized layers and wonder if we too are misreading the past. Could there have been another industrial civilization before us, one that existed millions of years ago? Could they have left behind their own fingerprints in the rock record, chemical anomalies, durable molecules, or burned fuel? Could we, like future geologists, be reading the remnants of a story we don't fully understand, one that might tell us that we are not the first to rise and fall in the Earth's long history? In the end, our legacy may not lie in the monuments we build or the history we write, but in the layers of rock and soil that will forever bear the marks of our existence. And as we continue to shape the world around us, we must remember that the Earth's memory is long, and it never forgets. Civilization, the great narrative of human progress, does not always announce itself through towering monuments or ornate palaces. In fact, sometimes it leaves only traces of something far more fundamental: chemistry. As we delve deeper into the possibility of ancient, long-lost civilizations, a key question looms over us. How would we even begin to detect evidence of such civilizations? What subtle patterns would we search for? What faint echoes could be hiding in the fossil record, misinterpreted as natural phenomena, when in reality they are something much more intentional? These questions lead us down a path where the answers may not be found in artifacts, sculptures, or forgotten treasures, but in the quiet anomalies woven into the Earth's geological fabric. The clues we seek are not always immediately obvious. Rather, they reside in the strange shifts, the oddities in the Earth's rhythm that defy natural expectations. To uncover them, we must focus on something often overlooked: the whispers from the deep past. These geological whispers suggest that something or someone once interfered with the natural processes of the planet, an influence that left behind no grand monuments, no stone inscriptions, but instead subtle, lingering imprints buried deep within the soil. In time, these imprints, whether deliberate or incidental, could become our most profound legacy. Beneath our feet, within the layers of Earth compacted by millennia of geological pressure, lies evidence of our civilization, not in the form of temples or statues or relics of kings, but in the most unlikely of places: packaging, pavement, and polymers. These are the items we never expected to endure, yet may in fact outlast everything else we've ever built. If time were a sieve, most of what we cherish would slip through its grasp. But these byproducts of our age, they could be the very things that persist, imprinted on the landscape for eons to come. Imagine a future geologist, tens of millions of years from now, brushing away centuries of dust from a shard of plastic, a fragment of metal, or a glimmering bead of aluminum. To this future scientist, what we now call waste might not be discarded trash. It might be a carefully preserved clue, a piece of evidence pointing to a lost era. These materials, unnatural to the planet, tell a story of technological innovation and environmental alteration. Just as a fossilized bone or an insect trapped in amber can offer us glimpses into ancient life, these synthetic creations may one day be the fossilized remains of our civilization, speaking for us long after we are gone. Scientists have already coined a term for such items: technofossils. These are objects created by human hands, materials forged through technology, although foreign to the natural world, have been woven into its tapestry. Glass, for example, is one of the oldest artificial materials we've ever produced, yet its durability makes it almost timeless. While natural volcanic glass like obsidian has been around for millennia, the clear, flat panes of glass in skyscrapers or smartphone screens are products of modern engineering. Deeply buried, shielded from the erosion of wind and water, these glass shards could persist for millennia. They could become like gleaming remnants of our past, scattered throughout ancient strata, waiting for future scientists to recognize them as remnants of a lost technological age. Concrete, too, may one day emerge as a defining signature of our civilization. Unassuming, ubiquitous, and poured over everything from city streets to highway foundations, concrete has become an artificial rock, engineered to withstand the test of time. The Romans had their own version of concrete, and some of their harbors still stand beneath the sea. However, our modern concrete, chemically complex and reinforced with steel, surpasses theirs. It doesn't just endure, it could form the literal bedrock of our era, embedding itself into the fossil record as a silent testament to our urban ambitions. Then there's aluminum. Lightweight, versatile, and strikingly rare in its natural metallic form, aluminum is one of the most abundant elements in the Earth's crust. Yet in its pure metallic form, it is a product of human intervention. Its extraction and refinement process requires deliberate technological effort. Aluminum cans, foil, and wires, artifacts of our everyday lives, would be unmistakable signals of human activity. If such items were discovered encased in sediment hundreds of millions of years from now, they would raise one critical question: who made this, and how? This too is a kind of fossil, metal forged not by nature but by human ingenuity. But it's not only familiar materials like glass, concrete, and aluminum that might survive. There are more exotic, stranger substances, plastics for instance, with polymer chains that do not exist in nature. Carbon fiber composites, synthetic rubbers, artificial dyes, all of these have been engineered for specific purposes, yet they don't biodegrade the way organic matter does. Instead, they persist, breaking down into smaller and smaller particles, eventually infiltrating the very soil, sediment, and living organisms around them. Imagine an ancient civilization, far older than our own, leaving behind technofossils made of materials that we've never seen. Could these relics of their unknown science, entombed deep within the rock, survive long enough to be discovered by future geologists? Would we even recognize them as artifacts? Or would we dismiss them as strange minerals or inexplicable geological anomalies? In a way, the concept of technofossils challenges the very idea of what constitutes waste. In the context of deep time, what we discard today, our packaging, our discarded technology, our byproducts, could become the most lasting evidence of our existence. The mounds of refuse that fill our landfills are not just garbage. They are compressed archives of human intention, sealed by the slow press of time. In thousands or millions of years, these discarded objects might mineralize, turning into fossil-like relics. Imagine a future geologist finding a stratum of stone that once was a landfill. Plastic bottles, aluminum cans, pieces of wire, all entombed in a hardened matrix, their original forms still recognizable, but now solidified in the geological record. Even the cities we've built, those grand testaments to human ambition, will leave behind their own traces. When buildings collapse or cities crumble, their concrete and rebar don't simply vanish. Bridges, tunnels, and buried pipelines will continue to exist, even after the cities themselves have turned to dust. Satellites, once our vigilant eyes in the sky, will eventually fall back to Earth, burning upon re-entry but not vanishing entirely. Fragments of scorched metal will scatter across the landscape, some sinking into oceans, others buried under layers of sediment. These remnants, too, may one day be discovered, fragments of a civilization long gone but not forgotten. So, if we can leave behind such definitive markers of our presence, why don't we find similar remnants from any other ancient civilizations? Is it because no one lived before us, or is it that we've simply not been looking in the right way? The technofossil record isn't just about decay, it is about memory, permanence, and how the artificial becomes an inseparable part of the natural world. Civilization, after all, is not only a cultural phenomenon, it is also a geological one. When we dig into the Earth's layers, we are not merely uncovering ancient rock and fossilized creatures. We are unearthing the habits and intentions of those who came before, the evidence of their existence embedded in the very fabric of the planet. And what of the civilizations that may have existed in the deep past? If they too left behind technofossils, would they have been preserved, or would erosion, subduction, and the passage of time have erased them entirely? Could it be that a few relics, strange and unrecognizable to our eyes, have survived? From time to time, scientists stumble upon objects that don't quite fit. The metallic sphere buried too deep, the trace element that shouldn't be there, the inexplicable anomaly that challenges the established narrative of Earth's history. Most of these are explained away, relegated to the drawers of conventional science, but some anomalies continue to whisper questions louder than answers. And so, we find ourselves looking not just at the physical layers of Earth's history, but at its deeper mysteries, the shadows of unknown civilizations that might once have existed. Could it be that the traces of these civilizations are already here, waiting to be recognized? Perhaps we have already discovered something strange, something subtle, hidden in the data. A ratio of carbon isotopes that doesn't quite match the expected pattern. A layer of clay rich in iridium, or platinum group elements, where none should be. A sudden temperature spike preserved in ancient sediment as though the planet itself briefly exhaled a fevered breath millions of years ago. These anomalies at first glance might seem like nothing more than the result of natural events, volcanoes, meteorites, tectonic shifts, or cosmic disturbances. But what if we are missing something more elusive? Not a natural occurrence, but an intentional one. A signal left behind by a long-forgotten civilization? Buried beneath our feet is a record of deep time, a hidden archive waiting to be read. Each layer of stone, silt, and fossil is a chapter in a vast, unspoken history, a library not of words, but of events. Perhaps as we dig deeper into the past, we will finally recognize the whispers, the traces, and the subtle messages that have been waiting for us all along. And in those moments when silence stretches across the landscape, something anomalous, something faint yet profound makes itself known. It's not the clamor of discovery, but rather a whisper, a subtle voice from the depths of time. Take, for example, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which occurred about 56 million years ago. Within the span of just a few thousand years, a geological blink of an eye, Earth's climate underwent a dramatic shift. Temperatures soared, oceans acidified, and vast quantities of carbon surged into the atmosphere. This sudden, intense warming mirrors a pattern that is hauntingly familiar to the situation we face today. Rising greenhouse gases, warming seas, and ecosystems teetering on the brink of collapse. Yet the cause of that ancient warming event remains a topic of heated debate among scientists. Was it volcanic eruptions, massive methane releases from clathrate deposits, or was there another, more obscure force at work? What if the fingerprints of that ancient warming event, with its speed and scale, were not entirely natural in origin? What if they point to something else entirely? A vanished intelligence, perhaps, not human, nor even mammalian, but something beyond our current imagination. A lost civilization, one that rose and fell before us, leaving behind only chemical traces as their legacy. This is, of course, speculative, an idea not embraced by mainstream science. But it opens its door to possibilities that challenge our conventional understanding of history. Could the Earth have hosted other technological species long before our own? If so, how would we even know? Consider another peculiar episode in Earth's history, the Great Pause, an enigmatic event that unfolded hundreds of millions of years before the dinosaurs during the early Cambrian period. This era is renowned for the Cambrian explosion, a period of rapid and unprecedented diversification of life. Yet, within this explosion of new species and forms, there is an oddity, a prolonged period of stasis in the fossil record. For tens of millions of years, evolution seemed to halt. There were no new major body plans, no dramatic extinctions. The evolutionary process appeared to freeze in place. Some paleontologists attribute this to a state of equilibrium, where ecosystems stabilized after their evolutionary burst. But others suggest that the pause could be the result of a disruption, a reset that left behind few traces, except for this peculiar stillness. Could it be that the absence of change itself is a clue? That we are simply not attuned to recognizing the silence of a history erased? Beyond the fossils, there are the isotope records, chemical signatures preserved in ancient rocks that act like time capsules, waiting to tell their story. Some scientists have discovered carbon anomalies in these rocks, odd patterns suggesting sudden bursts of light carbon, possibly linked to massive methane releases. These anomalies are similar to what we see today when fossil fuels are burned. The combustion of these fuels alters the balance between carbon isotopes, shifting the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13. Could such a shift buried deep in the geological record signal something more than just a natural occurrence? Could it hint at something artificial, an ancient civilization whose activity left behind a chemical trail we have yet to recognize? Then there are the geological anomalies that defy easy explanation. Vast stretches of vitrified rock found in ancient fortresses and hilltops across the world. Some of these rocks show signs of having been melted by heat far beyond what typical fires could produce. Mainstream theories often attribute these anomalies to lightning strikes or accidental fires, but none of these explanations fully account for the scale of the melting. While most of these sites are linked to human history, their strange, almost otherworldly characteristics remind us just how difficult it can be to reconstruct the full truth from fragments of charred stone. These remnants may not be the remains of lost civilizations, but they push us to consider how quickly even the most extraordinary of artifacts could vanish without a trace, leaving behind only clues that are nearly impossible to interpret. Consider the peculiar shapes of nature itself. The hexagonal columns at the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, the perfectly round stones of Costa Rica, or the polygonal megalithic walls of Peru. These formations, though not necessarily evidence of ancient civilizations, challenge our understanding of how natural processes can produce seemingly man-made structures. They remind us that the line between what is natural and what is artificial is not always as clear-cut as we might like to believe. Could it be that remnants of a forgotten civilization lie hidden in plain sight, indistinguishable from the natural world around us? And then there is the most unsettling question of all. If a civilization had existed on Earth tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, what would be left of it? Not their bones, certainly. Fossils are rare and bones dissolve over time. Not their cities either. Concrete crumbles, steel rusts, and glass gradually returns to sand. In the end, perhaps only faint chemical residues, tiny traces locked in the strata of the Earth, might remain. These traces could be too subtle to recognize, too buried to detect. In our current age, we might have already found evidence of these ancient technological species, but because we don't know what to look for, we might have passed it by without ever noticing. Science is, by nature, cautious. It relies on skepticism, on questioning assumptions, and on avoiding hasty conclusions. But curiosity is different. Curiosity asks questions that science has yet to answer. It dares to ask, what if Earth has hosted more than one rise of intelligent life? What if civilizations are not rare anomalies, but rather the natural result of time and biology, like waves that break on a shore, each one disappearing before the next rises? If that's the case, the real question isn't whether such civilizations ever existed, but where they are now. And in asking this, we are confronted with an even larger silence, one that doesn't sit beneath our feet, but stretches across the vastness of the cosmos. If intelligent life could rise and fall on Earth without leaving any clear trace, what might be happening across the stars? Perhaps the most profound mystery is not the absence of ancient civilizations here on Earth, but the lack of any visible civilizations out there in the distant reaches of the galaxy. The silence of the cosmos, this quiet stretching across the stars, might not be a sign of loneliness, but rather the echo of a process of rise and fall that we simply cannot perceive. This brings us to a question that has haunted thinkers, scientists, and dreamers for decades: the Fermi paradox. It's a question that reverberates through the quiet expanse of space, growing louder with each year that passes without contact from extraterrestrial civilizations. If intelligence is not unique to Earth, if life blooms across the cosmos as it does here, then why haven't we encountered any evidence of other civilizations? We've been scanning the skies, listening for signals, seeking patterns in the stars, radio waves, infrared pulses, signs of artificiality. And yet, the silence remains. It's a silence so profound that it almost hums, like a cosmic mystery that refuses to be solved. This is the essence of the Fermi paradox. If the universe is so old, so vast, and so filled with planets capable of supporting life, why have we not encountered any other advanced civilizations? Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Instead of peering outward, looking for signals from distant stars, what if we turned our attention inward, or even backward, into the layers of our own planet's history. If civilizations rise, burn brightly, and then fade into obscurity, could the silence we hear be the result of their fleeting existence? It's possible that the universe is teeming with life, but intelligent civilizations, the kind that build cities and split atoms, are as brief as flashes in the night sky. Their brilliance is quick to fade, leaving behind only echoes that are impossible to detect. If this is true, then the cosmic silence we observe is not one of loneliness, but one of turnover. Civilizations rise, burn out, and disappear before the next wave can emerge. Consider the brief lifespan of any mammalian species. On average, they last only about 1 million years, barely a blink in the context of geological or cosmic time. Modern humans have only been recording their history for about 5,000 years, and industrialization has only existed for a few centuries. If another intelligent species rose on Earth millions of years ago, built machines, dreamed of the stars, and then disappeared, how would we even know? How would their legacies survive? That's the unsettling implication of the Fermi paradox. Perhaps Earth is not the exception, but the rule. A planet that, like countless others, birthed intelligent life only to watch it flicker and fade. Civilizations may not be enduring beacons, but brief sparks, flickering, bright, and then gone. And yet there's something strangely comforting in this idea. It suggests that the rise of a civilization isn't some miraculous event, but a natural consequence of time and biology. But the fall is just as inevitable. It doesn't always take a cataclysmic disaster. Sometimes it's a subtle shift, a change in climate, the slow erosion of biodiversity, the quiet crumbling of complexity, or a language forgotten, etched into stone and left to the rain. Could Earth be just one of many failed experiments in the rise of intelligence? A place where life flickers and fades, not just once, but repeatedly, each time wiped clean by ice, fire, or the passage of time. Or perhaps Earth has never truly failed. Maybe it's a kind of planet that resets itself, a cosmic etch-a-sketch that shakes off the past every few 100 million years to see what will emerge next. But there's another possibility, one that is even more chilling than comforting. What if long-lived civilizations are rare, not by chance, but by nature? What if intelligence itself carries the seeds of its own destruction? Not just here on Earth, but everywhere. Perhaps there is a universal self-destruct mechanism, hidden within curiosity, technology, or hubris, a galactic pattern of rise and ruin that repeats endlessly across the stars. In this view, the silence of the universe isn't the absence of life, but the aftermath of civilizations that rose, burned bright, and then vanished, leaving only ruins too distant, too old, or too alien to recognize. Maybe we've been walking past them all along, buried beneath desert sands or frozen deep beneath the Antarctic ice. Maybe the past and the stars are both like graveyards, but not just that. Gardens as well, patiently awaiting the emergence of something new. A quiet, hidden fertility rests beneath the weight of time, beneath the debris of civilizations long gone. And what if the great filter, the mysterious barrier that seemingly prevents civilizations from their challenges of existence, doesn't lie ahead of us, but behind? What if, against all odds, we are one of the rare species that has managed to navigate through the early chaos of existence and emerged into this brief, fragile window of history? This moment, so delicate and so fleeting, might be far more precious than we realize. It could be the only pause in the continuum between destruction and transcendence, a time of choice that we must make with the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. In this light, the so-called Fermi paradox transforms from a question into a reflection, one that demands more of our introspection than our external curiosity. Perhaps the silence we perceive in the cosmos isn't a sign of absence or cosmic indifference. Perhaps it's a reflection of our own internal silence, a riddle we are meant to answer not by looking outward at the stars, but inward at ourselves. Are we listening to the void because we expect a response, or because deep down we fear that we might be the answer, the ones who speak in silence? Still, there's a greater possibility that emerges from this silence. Just as waves rise and fall against the shore, civilizations too rise and fall. Some, though, might manage to reach farther than others, stretching beyond their own time to leave behind something permanent, a mark, a message, a legacy that endures not only beyond their cities and species, but beyond time itself, reaching across the epochs to stand as a testament to their existence. It prompts us to ask, what does it truly take to leave such a legacy on a cosmic scale? How would an advanced civilization measure its growth, its progress, its permanence? And what kind of footprints would it leave across the stars? As we turn our gaze to the future of our own civilization, the question becomes, how might humanity one day join an exclusive club, a club of species that can harness not only the power of their own planet, but the very forces of the stars themselves? This is where the Kardashev scale enters the conversation, providing a conceptual framework that might allow us to glimpse the path of an evolving civilization. Proposed by Russian astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, this scale categorizes civilizations based on their energy consumption and the technologies they would need to reach these milestones. The scale itself is deceptively simple, yet it unlocks vast possibilities for what the future might hold. Type 1 civilization is one that can harness all the energy available on its home planet: geothermal, wind, solar, nuclear, everything. A Type 2 civilization extends its reach far beyond its planet, tapping into the energy of its very own star, perhaps by constructing something as ambitious as a Dyson sphere, a theoretical megastructure designed to capture all of a star's energy. A Type 3 civilization, the most advanced of all, has the ability to control the energy of an entire galaxy, wielding power on a scale we can barely begin to imagine. This scale, though simple in its premise, offers a profound way to think about the evolution of civilizations. It isn't just about energy, it's about the evolution of ideas, technologies, priorities, and ultimately, legacies. So where does humanity stand on this scale? We've made remarkable strides, to be sure. We've unlocked the power of the atom, harnessed fossil fuels, and begun tapping into renewable energy sources on a larger scale than ever before. Yet, we are far from mastering energy at the level of a true Type 1 civilization. Currently, we consume only a small fraction of the potential energy that Earth offers. Our reliance on fossil fuels, while decreasing, still dominates much of our energy consumption. Our infrastructure, vast as it is still fragile, vulnerable to the whims of natural disasters, political instability, and the depletion of finite resources. And all of these challenges threaten to undo the progress we've made. But then, what if there were others before us? Imagine an ancient civilization on Earth, one that might have risen long before our own, only to vanish without a trace. Could such a civilization have reached Type 1, mastering the forces of nature in ways that we can only dream of? Could they have harnessed the power of the wind, the sun, the Earth's geothermal energy, and used these forces to their advantage in ways that left no visible trace? Perhaps they left behind nothing but whispers in the fossil record, tiny, almost imperceptible clues that, if we are wise enough, could point us to their existence. The Kardashev scale does more than suggest a path toward the future. It also provides a framework for reflecting on the past. If a civilization were to advance to Type 2, how might we detect it? Such a civilization would no longer be bound by the confines of a single planet. It would be harvesting energy from its star, a feat so impressive that it would likely alter the cosmic landscape in ways we could detect, even from vast distances. Maybe it would leave behind traces we could spot in the infrared spectrum or strange patterns in cosmic background radiation. Massive alien megastructures might orbit distant stars, their energy use detectable across the vast reaches of space. The question of what a Type 3 civilization would look like is almost beyond our capacity to comprehend. To control the energy of an entire galaxy, capable of manipulating the power of billions of stars, it would be a feat of unimaginable scale. Their presence would almost certainly alter the fabric of the universe itself. Could we detect such a civilization by shifts in galactic structures, ripples in gravitational waves, or strange anomalies in the distribution of cosmic matter? But then, the question returns. Could we ever reach this level? Type 1 is still a distant goal, and it's not clear how long it will take for us to master the technologies and practices that would allow us to achieve such mastery. But it's possible, and we are certainly on a trajectory. The challenge, however, is not just technological. It's a matter of stewardship. It's about learning to manage not just the resources of our planet, but the planet itself. The road to Type 1 is paved with challenges, and much of it has to do with balancing the relentless march of growth with the sustainability of our environment. As we look at the Kardashev scale, we are reminded of a fundamental question. What kind of legacy will we leave behind? What will future generations inherit from us, and how will they understand our relationship with energy? Will we be remembered as the species that ushered in a new era of civilization, or will we become just another forgotten chapter in the vast history of Earth? The possibility that we might not be the first species to reach for the stars, but possibly the first to fail, is a sobering thought. It could mean that we are inheritors of past mistakes, of civilizations that reached too far and too fast, exhausting their resources until they collapsed into the silence of forgotten history. If such civilizations existed, their mark on the Earth could be hidden deep within its strata, like the faint echo of a song once sung, now silent, their advanced technologies buried beneath layers of time. But this thought isn't purely melancholic. It also inspires us. If we can avoid the same pitfalls that others might have encountered, if we can learn to harmonize with the forces that govern our world, then perhaps we too can leave behind a legacy worthy of our place in the universe. The Kardashev scale is not just a tool for measuring energy. It's a mirror reflecting our potential and also our responsibilities. As we search the stars, contemplating the infinite expanse of space, we must ask ourselves, what would it be like to find traces of another civilization, one that existed long before ours? What markers might they have left behind? And as we look for signs of alien civilizations, it becomes clear that what we are truly searching for are not just terrestrial life forms, are not just extraterrestrial life forms, but that the very footprints of technical existence, the signs that we too might one day leave behind. Perhaps the traces of other civilizations are not as obvious as we might expect. Perhaps they don't send signals through space or build giant megastructures like Dyson spheres. Perhaps they are more subtle. Maybe, just like us, they left behind their own form of space junk, or emitted strange, faint heat signatures into the void. Maybe they vanished before they could ever achieve the technological heights we imagine. Or perhaps their markers are buried, waiting for the right tools, the right eyes to uncover them. The quest to understand the rise and fall of civilizations is not just about seeking others. It's also about understanding ourselves. The search for techno-signatures, those hidden clues of intelligence, is more than a cosmic treasure hunt. It's a search for our place in the vast, unyielding cosmos, a search for meaning and ultimately for legacy. As we reach for the stars, the question isn't just whether we'll find others, but whether we'll leave a trace of ourselves that future generations will one day uncover. Imagine, if you will, a vast fleet of decommissioned satellites, abandoned megastructures, and forgotten relics scattered across the endless expanse of the cosmos. These remnants, once beacons of civilizations that have long since disappeared, drift aimlessly in the cold void, much like discarded toys forgotten in the great cosmic playground. In this immense, uncharted territory of space, could we ever hope to find traces of these long-lost creations? It's possible. In fact, we might detect their faint signals or see their decaying forms orbiting dead planets, their once proud technology now mere shadows of its former glory. But even these remnants may not be easily distinguishable from the natural phenomena that fill the universe. Asteroids, comets, and cosmic dust that have been in motion for billions of years. Unless we know exactly what we're looking for, these ancient traces may blend into the background, undetected. Then there's the ever-present question of timing. What if we're searching at the wrong moment? The universe is staggeringly vast, and our search for extraterrestrial life is still in its infancy. We've only just begun to develop the technology that could allow us to peer deeper into distant stars and galaxies, to understand them in a way that previous generations could only dream of. But what if the civilizations we seek have already vanished, leaving behind nothing but memories written in the stars? Or worse, what if they are just beginning to rise and we're unable to see them because our methods and tools are still too primitive, too young? The possibility that intelligent life exists elsewhere and that we simply cannot detect it is a humbling thought. Time in this grand cosmic scale is more than just a unit of measurement. It's a living, breathing factor, one that may change everything we think we know about the rise and fall of civilizations. What if these civilizations, both human and alien, follow a pattern we haven't yet uncovered? A pattern so elusive, so fleeting, that we may only have a window of opportunity to detect them before they vanish into the mists of time. These windows of visibility might be so brief that we miss them entirely, like watching the faint glow of a distant star just before it fades away. Civilizations, like the civilizations of Earth, are prone to rise and fall, to be born and to perish. And yet the civilizations of the stars could have life cycles even shorter than our own. Could their entire existence be compressed into a mere blink of an eye on the cosmic scale? If so, how could we ever hope to catch even a fleeting glimpse of them? The notion that Earth might be the only home to intelligent life in the universe, once a widely held belief, now seems increasingly unlikely as we learn more about the cosmos. And yet our search continues, driven by the insatiable human curiosity to know whether we are truly alone. But perhaps in our search, we are limited by our own narrow understanding of life, intelligence, and the kinds of signals that might point us to other civilizations. What if these signals aren't the booming radio waves we expect, but rather the faintest of echoes? Signals so subtle, so fragmented that we simply aren't equipped to detect them. What if there are civilizations out there, but they're too far gone or too different from us for us to even recognize their presence? The quest to find these faint echoes, these technological signatures, whether they manifest as Dyson spheres, anomalous waste heat, or fragments of cosmic debris, is just the beginning. But one thing is certain. As we probe the depths of space, we will confront one fundamental question, one that we will not be able to ignore. What exactly are we hoping to find? Could the idea of a lost civilization, one that has long since vanished from the stars, leaving behind no obvious traces in space, be more than just a theory? Perhaps it is a possibility worth considering. As we look ahead, as we wonder what may be out there, just beyond our reach, it's impossible not to ask. Could our own civilization one day disappear in such a way, leaving behind only the faintest of echoes? If the civilizations of Earth are anything to go by, the answer might be far closer than we think. Earth's history, with its countless civilizations that have risen and fallen, leaves us with a profound question. Could it be that the quest to find lost civilizations, whether from distant planets or right here on Earth, is not just about understanding the past, but about the very nature of memory itself? What if the myths, the legends, the stories passed down through generations of humans are not just fanciful creations or cultural artifacts, but fragments of deeper truths? What if stories of lost lands, swallowed by the seas, or civilizations that rose and fell in the distant past are not simply tales to entertain or explain the world, but echoes of something that once was? Take, for example, the legend of Atlantis, which has captivated human imagination for millennia. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato described a powerful, technologically advanced civilization that existed more than 9,000 years before his own time, only to sink into the ocean after a single day and night of catastrophic events. Plato presented the story as a historical account, not just a fable. Yet, scholars have long debated whether the tale of Atlantis was meant as an allegory, a cautionary tale warning of the dangers of hubris, greed, and moral decay. Could it be, though, that Plato was not simply telling a story, but preserving a memory? Could Atlantis have been a real place, a real civilization, one that existed long before any of the civilizations we recognize today? The idea that Atlantis could have been more than just fiction is both compelling and intriguing. Some researchers have pointed out that Plato's description of Atlantis, with its advanced knowledge and grand city-states, bears striking similarities to the ancient cultures of the Mediterranean, from the Minoans of Crete to the ancient Egyptians. These civilizations, much like the one Plato described, were known for their sophisticated technology, their art, and their far-reaching influence. In fact, some scholars suggest that the eruption of the Thera volcano around 1600 BCE, which devastated the Minoan civilization and triggered massive tsunamis, may have been the event that inspired Plato's story. Could this disaster, this cataclysmic loss of an entire civilization, have become the foundation for the myth of Atlantis. But Atlantis is not the only myth to consider. Around the world, across cultures and civilizations, there are stories of sunken lands, of civilizations lost beneath the waves. In the Pacific, there are tales of Lemuria, a mythical continent said to have existed long before human civilization, only to be swallowed by the ocean. While the concept of Lemuria was largely dismissed by modern science, its inclusion in ancient legends suggests that similar myths about lost civilizations might have been shared across distant cultures, possibly echoing real events from ancient times. What if these myths, these stories passed down through generations, hold a key to understanding the past, not just of Earth, but of the universe itself? Could they be more than just fantastical tales, more than mere fiction? Could they be fragments of a deeper, ancient truth about the rise and fall of civilizations that we can no longer see? As we look to the stars, we might also find ourselves looking inward, to the stories that have shaped our understanding of our own world. In the quiet corners of our collective imagination, in the legends and myths we've inherited, there may lie the keys to unlocking not just the secrets of our past, but the mysteries of the cosmos itself. One of the most captivating and enduring ideas in human history is the tale of Lemura, a mythical land that stretches across the realms of speculation, history, and imagination. This legend, first introduced by the 19th century zoologist Philip Sclater, presents the notion of a vast continent that once bridged the Indian and Pacific Oceans. According to Sclater, this massive landmass had sunk beneath the waves of the ocean, leaving behind only faint traces in the form of unique and isolated species that seemingly had no connections to the rest of the world's ecosystems. These enigmatic creatures, along with the remnants of the land itself, fueled the idea of a lost civilization, a grand world submerged beneath the ocean's depths. Although modern science has definitively debunked Lemura as a literal place, the myth still resonates within certain spiritual and pseudoscientific circles. What keeps the legend alive, even in the face of scientific rejection, is the possibility that it holds a deeper, more profound truth. Could Lemura, like the fabled Atlantis, be more than just an allegorical story? Could it represent an ancient, advanced civilization lost to the ravages of time, obscured by the relentless forces of geological history? These questions speak to something deeper than the myth itself. They touch on the human longing to uncover the hidden truths of our past, to peer into the forgotten corners of history, and perhaps to discover that our understanding of civilization and its origins is far more complex than we could ever have imagined. This idea of a forgotten, ancient world isn't limited to the story of Lemura. Across the globe, similar tales of lost civilizations surface in the myths and oral traditions of countless cultures. The Sumerians, for example, spoke of a time before their own great civilization, a time when the gods themselves walked among humans, a time long before recorded history, when a great flood wiped out the previous inhabitants of the earth. In the Americas, various Native American tribes recount stories of a submerged land known as Atlan, a place that once existed but was swallowed by the ocean in the distant past. Similarly, in ancient China, myths abound of a time long ago when the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, legendary rulers sometimes credited with extraordinary technological advances, reigned over an age far more advanced than anything recorded in history. When taken together, these myths begin to suggest something remarkable, that these aren't just random stories, isolated from one another by geography and time. Instead, they may represent a shared cultural memory, an echo of something real, something that transcends individual civilizations. What if these tales of lost lands, of floods that wiped out entire civilizations, and of cataclysmic events are not merely the products of imagination or superstition, but are encoded fragments of human history? If this is true, then we are left to wonder, are these myths, like Plato's story of Atlantis, veiled recollections of actual events, passed down through generations, distorted and reshaped with each retelling? The implications of this idea are profound. If these stories are not just folklore, but reflections of real long-lost civilizations, they challenge our understanding of history. Could it be that other advanced civilizations, similar to ours, once thrived on Earth, only to be destroyed by natural disasters or their own flaws? And if such civilizations did exist, what might they have left behind? The answer may be more subtle than we realize. It might not be grand monuments or treasure-filled tombs. Instead, the traces of these lost civilizations could be buried deep beneath the Earth's surface, hidden in layers of sediment and time, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. This notion of lost civilizations dovetails with a broader theme: the fragility of human achievement. Civilizations rise and fall, often leaving only the faintest traces of their existence. When we look at the grand sweep of history, it's humbling to consider that the civilizations we build may one day crumble, leaving behind nothing but myths, stories, and the echoes of our existence. This realization raises a provocative question. What will be the fate of our own civilization 1,000 or 10,000 years from now? Will our cities, our technologies, and our achievements survive the test of time, or will they vanish beneath the sands of history, leaving only cryptic legends for future generations to ponder? And if humanity is not the first to have walked the earth, could there be other, even older civilizations whose ruins are hidden beneath the ocean's depths or buried beneath layers of rock and sediment? Perhaps the greatest mystery of all isn't whether these ancient civilizations existed, but whether their stories, like the fabled Atlantis and Lemura, are still encoded in the collective consciousness of humanity, waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps the greatest mystery is the recognition that these lands, and the people who lived on them, may have once existed, and that their stories still resonate within us, even if we don't always know it. As we look out into the cosmos, searching for signs of alien life, there is a strange parallel to be drawn with our search for lost civilizations. In a way, we are looking for traces of our own past, reaching into the distant corners of time to find evidence of what came before. The search for extraterrestrial life may be, in part, an attempt to understand whether we are the only civilization to have ever risen to such heights, or whether we, too, are part of a much larger, more ancient tale. Are we destined to become a myth, a footnote in a future civilization's history, just as the ancient cultures before us have become myths? As we dig deeper into the myths of old, we find that many of them share a striking similarity, particularly in their references to great floods. These flood myths, found in texts from the Bible's Noah to the Epic of Gilgamesh and across indigenous cultures in the Americas, are among the most ubiquitous stories in human history. Vast, destructive floods that almost wipe out humanity, leaving only a few survivors to start anew. But what if these stories aren't simply allegories or religious teachings? What if they're echoes of a real, cataclysmic event, one that affected the entire planet? The consistency of these flood myths is nothing short of astonishing. More than 300 distinct cultures across the world have their own versions of a great flood narrative. While the details may vary, the wrath of the gods, a heroic figure, or a boat to save the survivors, the core elements are strikingly similar. A vast flood that engulfs the earth, a near-total destruction of human civilization, and a small group of survivors tasked with rebuilding humanity. So the question arises, are these myths simply independent inventions, the result of each culture's need to explain natural disasters, or do they represent a collective memory of a single global catastrophe, passed down and distorted over countless generations? This possibility is supported by a growing body of scientific evidence that suggests large-scale, catastrophic floods may have occurred at various points in Earth's history. These events, far from being isolated incidents, could have been world-changing occurrences, massive floods that transformed the planet's landscapes and reshaped the course of human history. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the end of the last ice age, when the melting of glaciers raised sea levels dramatically, flooding previously dry lands. Imagine a world where the seas rise quickly, swallowing coastlines, submerging entire cities, and altering the environment so drastically that the survivors could only grasp at the faintest traces of their former civilizations. What would they remember? What stories would they pass down? The geological evidence for such mega floods is compelling, though often buried deep beneath layers of time and sediment. But the scientific study of these ancient floods is revealing new insights into the true scale of these events, and the possibility that they shape not only our planet's geography, but also the myths and stories that continue to echo through human history. Could it be that the flood myths, those ancient tales of destruction and renewal, are more than just stories? Could they be fragments of a truth that, like Lemura, has yet to be fully uncovered? The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis stands as one of the most captivating theories of ancient catastrophic events. Over 7,500 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea was believed to have breached a natural dam, sending waves of saltwater cascading into what was once a vast freshwater lake, the Black Sea. This immense flood would have inundated a wide expanse of land, obliterating coastal settlements and forever altering the landscape. But was this a localized disaster confined to the shores of the Black Sea? Or could it have been part of a broader global pattern of rising waters that marked the conclusion of the last ice age? If survivors were scattered across the globe, could they have carried with them the echoes of this catastrophe? Could these memories have been embedded in the folklore passed down through generations, transforming into myths and legends? In an attempt to explain such cataclysmic events, the scientific community has proposed several theories. One hypothesis suggests that comet strikes could have triggered massive floods. The impact of a comet might have set off tremendous tsunamis, earthquakes, and fires, wreaking havoc and leaving devastation in its wake. Such catastrophic events could have resonated in the collective memory of ancient people, remembered long after the physical evidence had been eroded by time. Another potential explanation for these world-altering floods lies in the gradual melting of the Laurentide ice sheet. As the ice sheets receded, they released vast quantities of fresh water, flooding the oceans and raising sea levels. To the ancient people witnessing these events, it would have been a disaster of unimaginable proportions, a cataclysm so vast and incomprehensible that it may have been woven into their collective consciousness, becoming the foundation for the creation of future myths. But what if these floods were not isolated incidents occurring at the end of a single ice age, but recurring events spread throughout Earth's history? Could there have been multiple floods, each one leaving traces not in the form of floodwaters themselves, but in the sediments and bones of the creatures that perished? These remnants, eroded over millennia, might have left behind only faint fragments that over time could have been transformed into myth. Could the flood stories that appear in countless cultures be the remnants of several different catastrophic events, each one witnessed by a different set of survivors who passed their memories down through generations? The notion that these ancient floods were linked to larger, cyclical geological events raises another intriguing question. What role did the human psyche play in these stories? Humans are, by nature, pattern-seeking creatures, constantly looking for meaning in the chaos that surrounds them. In this sense, floods might represent not just physical disasters, but a metaphor for the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. These stories, passed down through the ages, might have been early humans' attempts to understand the uncontrollable forces of nature, forces they experienced firsthand but could not fully comprehend. As the floodwaters receded and the survivors emerged from the devastation, what was left in their wake? The survivors, forever changed, might have clung to the myth of the flood as both a reminder of their origins and a warning of nature's unfathomable power. But why are the survivors always so few? And why do they often seem to begin anew in a world that is somehow better, more virtuous? The idea of a new beginning, of humanity rising from the floodwaters, speaks to something deeply symbolic. It's not merely a retelling of a traumatic event. It reflects the resilience of life itself, the cyclical nature of civilizations. Each flood myth, in its own way, tells us that from the ashes of the old, something new will rise, a hope for renewal and rebirth. This enduring theme of renewal, of overcoming destruction to build something better, is why the flood myth is so universal, echoing across cultures and ages. It speaks to a fundamental hope that even after catastrophe, humanity can rebuild and thrive again. As we examine the scientific and mythological possibilities surrounding these ancient flood stories, the convergence of these two realms becomes increasingly fascinating. Are the floods simply symbolic, or do they have a grounding in historical events so distant that only their faintest traces remain? And if such events did occur, how might they have shaped the development of early civilizations, influencing their beliefs and myths? The relevance of these ancient stories extends far beyond history and myth. Today, in an era where natural disasters seem to be ever more frequent and the threat of climate change looms large, we find ourselves more aware of our vulnerability to the very forces of nature that our ancestors once faced. The more we delve into the intersection of myth and geology, the more we begin to realize that these ancient tales may not be mere flights of imagination. They may hold fragments of truth, reminders of cataclysms that shaped our planet long before humans as we know them came into being. As we contemplate these stories, we cannot help but wonder, what if there is more to them than metaphor? What if these tales are not only the product of human imagination, but a preserved memory of a world that existed before ours, a time when civilization as we know it had not yet arisen? The flood myths, then, could be seen as echoes, faint, fragile memories of a distant past. And in these echoes may lie the key to unlocking the mysteries of our origins. But what of the gods in these stories? Could they be more than mere divine figures? Could they, in fact, be the survivors of a forgotten age? The line between myth and history blurs when we begin to ask whether these gods were witnesses to a world that has since been erased by time. In many ancient cultures, gods were not distant, ethereal beings, but tangible figures who walked among humans. They were often depicted as wise, skilled, and equipped with knowledge and tools far beyond the capabilities of those they encountered. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, the ancient Greeks told tales of Prometheus, and the Egyptians revered Thoth. But what if these gods were not supernatural beings at all? What if they were survivors of a civilization that predates our own, their knowledge and technology far surpassing anything the ancient world had known? The idea that ancient gods were survivors of a lost civilization carrying with them advanced knowledge fits into a pattern found in numerous mythologies. When these gods appeared in ancient cultures, they didn't just impart spiritual teachings, they offered practical knowledge, agriculture, metalworking, architecture, and mathematics. Such knowledge would have seemed magical, almost otherworldly to early humans. The myth of Prometheus, who gave fire to humanity, is one such example. Fire, a symbol of knowledge and enlightenment, might represent a memory of early humans encountering a more advanced culture, one with access to fire and metallurgy long before humanity learned to master these elements. Similar stories are found across the globe. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, gods share agricultural wisdom with humanity. The Bible's tale of Adam and Eve mirrors the theme of knowledge being granted to humans, knowledge that sets them apart from the natural world. Viewed through the lens of the Silurian Hypothesis, these stories could be seen as garbled memories of interactions with a technologically advanced culture, survivors from an age of lost knowledge. The myths of gods teaching humanity the fundamentals of civilization often focus on imparting knowledge of agriculture, tools, and control over natural forces. But what if these gods were not divine figures at all, but rather advanced beings who use technology indistinguishable from magic to early humans? What if the extraordinary feats they performed were not the result of divine power, but the products of a lost, advanced civilization? If such a civilization existed long before the dawn of recorded history, the role of gods in these origin myths takes on an entirely new dimension. In Mesopotamia, the gods of the Sumerians were credited with teaching humanity how to write and build cities. Native American cultures, too, tell of trickster gods who imparted crucial survival knowledge. What if these gods were not divine, but survivors of an ancient, technologically advanced civilization that had passed down its wisdom to humanity over the ages? These myths, when viewed through this lens, might not only speak of gods and divine intervention, but also of a time when humans were not the first to dominate the earth. An intriguing element of many of these myths is the connection between gods and the stars. In ancient Egypt, the gods were said to have descended from the stars, bringing divine knowledge with them. The Dogon people of Mali, too, possess intricate knowledge of the star system, particularly the star Sirius, that seems too precise to have been passed down through ordinary means. Could these stories be the remnants of encounters with travelers from other advanced civilizations? Or could they be memories of survivors from a time when humanity was not alone on Earth, but coexisted with other, more advanced beings? The idea that star knowledge could be a remnant of a civilization so advanced that their very presence among the stars was seen as godly adds another layer of mystery to these ancient tales. In many cultures, the arrival of gods is inextricably linked to pivotal moments in human history, moments that often coincide with sudden, dramatic advancements in human society. The timing of these appearances is striking. It's during these moments of accelerated development that humans began to make remarkable strides in their understanding of the world. The domestication of animals, the cultivation of crops, and the construction of monumental structures marked a definitive shift in the trajectory of human civilization. These were not just technological innovations. They were the foundational steps that transformed humanity from nomadic hunter-gatherers into settled agricultural societies. But were these advancements really the result of gradual, organic human progress? Could there have been something or someone beyond human understanding that facilitated this rapid evolution? Some have wondered whether these divine interventions could actually be the remnants of knowledge passed down by survivors of an ancient, technologically advanced civilization, one that predates the societies we are familiar with today. It is conceivable that the rapid development of cities, the sudden emergence of writing systems, and the construction of awe-inspiring architecture were not mere products of slow, incremental progress, but rather the fruits of knowledge that had been imparted by beings or civilizations far more advanced than the early humans they encountered. This theory isn't limited to just a few ancient mythologies. Across cultures and continents, similar flood myths suggest a more complex picture of human prehistory. In these stories, we find hints of civilizations that might have existed and even thrived before modern humanity came to be. These civilizations could have been so technologically advanced that their achievements and tools, once misunderstood by more primitive societies, were later mythologized and deified as divine acts. What if these gods were not gods at all, but survivors of an ancient, technologically sophisticated civilization, who, after some catastrophic event, were left to guide the next iteration of human life? It's possible that the gods described in ancient texts were, in fact, these survivors, using what little remained of their once great technologies to help humanity rebuild. They may have shared knowledge sparingly, fully aware that their teachings might be too advanced, too complex for a less developed people to fully comprehend. These enlightened beings could have been reluctant to reveal too much, understanding that humanity was not yet ready for such profound wisdom. This reframes the idea of gods as benevolent rulers or deities. Rather than omnipotent, they could be seen as guides, beings of incredible knowledge, seeking to prevent humanity from repeating the very mistakes that led to the fall of their own civilization. The gods intervening at critical moments in history, guiding rulers and kings, granting wisdom, teaching agriculture, medicine, and craftsmanship, these might not be the acts of divine beings in the traditional sense. Instead, they could represent the actions of individuals who had seen the consequences of unchecked technological growth, trying to steer humanity away from the destructive path they themselves had once followed. But if this theory holds, how does it square with the deep spiritual and mythological traditions that have persisted throughout human history? Do these gods and heroes, so central to our collective mythologies, emerge solely from the human imagination, shaped by the minds of people seeking meaning in an often mysterious and unpredictable world? Or do they represent the remnants of a lost age, an age far older and more advanced than the one we know? In fact, there may be a way in which both interpretations are true. The human mind, in its attempt to grasp the enormity of the world, could have created gods, beings beyond human understanding, through which to explain the unknown. At the same time, these gods could have been based on actual historical figures, survivors of a time when human civilization wasn't the first to rise on Earth. The ancient myths and stories we treasure might not simply be the products of folklore or fiction. They may hold deep, encoded fragments of a forgotten history. These tales could be allegories and symbols preserving the knowledge of a civilization that preceded ours. And just as we look back at these myths with wonder, one day, Future generations may look at our own stories of technological advances, societal progress, and the rise of our modern world, interpreting them through their own lens, perhaps thinking of us as gods, or as the predecessors to their own civilization. This reflects a profound truth. As we peel back the layers of myth and history, we begin to realize that the story of human civilization is far more complex than we have imagined. The possibility that the gods of ancient stories were survivors of an earlier, highly advanced age opens up entirely new avenues of thought about our origins. Yet, as compelling as this idea is, it only deepens the mystery. What if these gods were real people, beings with knowledge so advanced, so beyond the capabilities of their contemporaries that they were mistaken for divine figures? And if they were real, what became of the civilization they came from? What caused its downfall, and why do we no longer see any trace of it today? The tale of the gods, like all stories of our past, may hold the key to unlocking the mysteries of a world long lost. As we continue to delve deeper into the secrets of deep time, studying the remnants of ancient civilizations and their mysterious legacies, we find that the line between myth and history begins to blur. What we once thought of as myth may very well be rooted in a distant reality, one that predated us by millennia. And who knows, perhaps the next chapter of this story isn't buried in the past at all, but lies just beyond the horizon of our future. Could it be that the lost remnants of an ancient civilization will one day be unearthed, bringing us closer to understanding the truth behind the gods who shaped the early world? Yet even as we explore these tantalizing possibilities, we are reminded that history is often a murky river, flowing in directions we cannot always predict. Whether written or passed down in whispered tales, history tends to raise more questions than it answers. And perhaps that is the true nature of our quest, to seek understanding in the gaps, to explore the unknown, and to wonder, just as the ancients did, about the mysterious forces that shaped the world we know today. But what if the stories we weave today about our civilization, the narrative we are living through now, might one day be absorbed into an even greater tale, a tale that stretches far beyond our comprehension? Could the echoes of our world, like whispers on the wind, continue to reverberate across time, reaching distant generations who, much like us, will wonder about the people who walked the earth long before them? The thought is both exhilarating and humbling. It invites us to reflect not only on our present, but also on the fragile nature of our legacy, on the question of whether our civilization, in all its vastness and complexity, might one day be nothing more than a distant memory. What if the world we know now will, in the future, become nothing more than a fable, passed down through generations, cherished and mythologized as we today do with the tales of civilizations long gone? This line of inquiry leads us to another fascinating realm of thought, the intricate way in which modern science fiction mirrors these ancient concepts. It's not difficult to see the connections between the speculative worlds we create today and those age-old myths of gods, heroes, and lost wisdom. What if our fascination with alien life, technological ruin, or dystopian futures isn't just a reflection of our current fears and desires, but a glimpse into a future where the lessons of long-lost civilizations echo across the stars? What if these futuristic stories are not merely imagined projections, but rather subconscious reflections of a shared human desire to uncover, rediscover, and learn from a past that might be hidden beneath the surface of history? As we gaze into the vastness of the cosmos, our minds often wander not only into the future, but also into the past. We imagine a time long before our modern age, before the written word, before technology as we know it, a time beyond recorded history, a time that might still hold secrets yet to be uncovered. For millennia, humans have gazed up at the stars and wondered, is there something more out there? Something greater than the daily grind of existence? Science fiction, though born in the present moment, carries within it echoes of these ancient longings. It is more than just entertainment. It taps into deep-seated fears, hopes, and yearnings, many of which have been passed down through the ages. These stories don't just explore what might happen, they ask us to question what might have been, what we may have forgotten, and what is yet to come. Imagine, for a moment, a future far beyond our own, a future where humanity has reached the apex of technological advancement. Yet, even with all their knowledge, these future beings stumble upon the remnants of a civilization long forgotten. They find colossal structures, immense in scale, so complex and intricate that even the most advanced minds of their time struggle to grasp the origins of such marvels. These are not mere ruins. They are artifacts of an advanced world that existed long before. Their technology so sophisticated that it seems almost magical, beyond the realm of possibility. It feels like something from a dream, a reality so fantastical that it is almost too incredible to believe. Yet what if this isn't just a fiction? What if this story of rediscovering something ancient and beyond comprehension is not merely a narrative we tell ourselves to fill the space between the stars, but a reflection of our own buried memories, a collective consciousness of a time long past? Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, a notion that suggests that all humans share a deep reservoir of memories, symbols, and archetypes that have been passed down across generations. These symbols shape the myths we create, the stories we tell, and the dreams we have, even though we may not fully understand where they come from. Jung argued that the myths we construct are not just creative expressions. They are the tangible manifestations of unconscious truths, of ancient knowledge that speaks to us in ways we don't always recognize. Perhaps the gods, the lost civilizations, the forgotten wisdom we so often dream of, are not merely the products of creative minds. They may be fragments of something much deeper, something embedded in the collective psyche of humanity, a memory of a time when civilizations rose to incredible heights, only to fall into the abyss of forgotten history. This idea of forgotten civilizations, of ancient knowledge passed down from the gods, appears repeatedly throughout the myths of many cultures. The figure of the teacher, often portrayed as a godlike figure, appears again and again in these stories. Prometheus, the Titan from Greek mythology, is perhaps the most famous example, offering humanity the gift of fire, both a literal and symbolic illumination. In other cultures, gods like the Anunnaki or figures like Quetzalcoatl impart knowledge to humanity, teaching us agriculture, writing, metallurgy, and other essential skills that would form the foundation of civilization. These gods do not merely observe, they interact with humanity, guiding us, providing the tools we need to survive and thrive. But what if these gods were not just figures of myth? What if they were representations of something real, an ancient, advanced civilization whose knowledge and wisdom were passed down to us as divine gifts? In these ancient tales, there are also recurring stories of lost cities: Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, each one a symbol of immense power, technological brilliance, and cultural achievement. These cities were not merely fictional backdrops for adventure stories. They represented something greater, an ideal of what humanity could achieve. Whether or not these cities ever existed is a matter of debate, but their symbolism remains powerful. Could these lost cities be more than just fanciful tales? Could they be memories of a civilization that reached unparalleled heights of knowledge and innovation, only to be swallowed by the tides of time, their legacy buried beneath layers of history? Fiction, in its many forms, often serves as a mirror to our collective psyche. Just as ancient myths capture profound truths about human nature, so too does modern fiction reveal deep-seated fears and desires. The recurring themes of lost technologies, ancient aliens, and civilizations brought low by disaster are not merely the product of creative minds. They tap into something primal within us. They reflect our anxieties about the future, our yearning for something greater, and our fascination with the idea that we may have once been part of something far more magnificent than we can now comprehend. These stories speak to a longing for greatness, for a lost golden age that may have existed long before our time, and perhaps, just perhaps, it hints at the possibility that we too can achieve such greatness in the future. The allure of forgotten civilizations lies not in the past, but in the hope that we too can one day reach the same heights of knowledge and achievement. This desire to believe in forgotten greatness is embedded in our collective memory. It is a longing to connect with something greater than ourselves, something that transcends the fleeting nature of our lives. If we are not the first civilization to rise, then perhaps we are not as alone in the universe as we sometimes feel. The possibility that our predecessors reached a level of wisdom and understanding far beyond our own suggests that, in time, we too might achieve such greatness. This hope is a powerful force. It connects us not only to a vision of a future full of promise, but also to the ancient, wiser civilizations that came before us, whose wisdom still echoes through time, waiting to be rediscovered. Yet we must also ask ourselves, why do we cling to these stories of lost greatness? Do we seek to believe in a forgotten past because it gives us hope for the future? Are we drawn to these tales because they promise us that our future, like the mythical lost cities of old, could one day be filled with discovery, enlightenment, and brilliance? Is it our collective unconscious urging us to remember what we have lost, or to prevent us from forgetting what we might one day uncover? These stories, in the end, are not just about the past. They are projections of our own future, a roadmap pointing toward the unknown. Fiction, like mythology, serves as a compass, guiding us through the vast uncertainty of the universe. It encourages us to look deeper, to question the nature of our existence, and to reconsider the mysteries that lie buried beneath the surface of history. As we journey into the unknown, whether through the stars or through the forgotten ruins of our own world, who knows what we might uncover? Perhaps the greatest discovery will not be in the far reaches of space, but in the world beneath our feet, the lost cities, the ancient civilizations, the forgotten knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. As we ponder the traces left behind by these vanished civilizations, whether through the myths that endure or through the speculative stories of science fiction, we are reminded of our own tenuous place in the grand scheme of time. What marks will we leave behind? What will future generations think of us? And as we peer into the mystery of our own geological footprint, we are left to wonder, what footprints might we one day uncover from civilizations that have long since vanished? When we look at the earth beneath us, it feels as though we are walking on an ancient canvas, a canvas slowly being painted over by the ever-shifting layers of time. Every stone, every scrap of human activity, every piece of pottery, every building that rises and falls, all of these things tell a story. But what story will they tell? What will future beings make of the traces we leave behind? Will they understand the narrative we sought to create, or will it be lost to the ravages of time, like so many stories before it? Consider for a moment how we interpret the fossils of ancient creatures, remnants of life forms that existed long before our species took its first steps. These fossils speak to us, but in a language we struggle to understand. What if the remnants of our civilization, our broken smartphones, crumbling highways, rusted bridges, and decaying cities, will be equally baffling to the future? The traces we leave behind may be as fragmented as a half-assembled puzzle, an incomplete story that future generations will try to piece together. Will these relics hold any meaning to them? Will they know who we were, what we valued, or what we achieved? Or will our civilization be lost to the noise of history, forgotten and obscured by time? Even the greatest monuments of our age, the pyramids of Egypt, seem destined to crumble into dust eventually. If the records of our civilization are relegated to mere whispers in time, will the story we wish to tell, our legacy, be understood by those who come after us? True legacy is not just about leaving behind physical structures, but about leaving a mark on the world, a mark that endures beyond the moment in which it was created. And yet, when we look at the vast accumulation of human-made waste, plastic, discarded electronics, pollutants in the oceans, a stark contrast emerges between the desire for legacy and the reality of what we are leaving behind. What will future civilizations make of the synthetic materials we have created? Some of these materials, designed for convenience, may endure for millennia, long after our time has passed. The question then is whether we are leaving behind a legacy or simply creating waste. Could what we consider to be waste today be seen by future civilizations as clues to understanding who we were? Could every discarded object, every broken piece of technology, every polluted river be part of an inevitable process that future generations might one day decode? When we examine the sprawling cities of today, or look upon the remnants of ancient empires that once ruled the world, we might be tempted to think that we are no different. But the urge to leave something permanent behind is a complex and deeply human desire. Is it driven by a need to preserve our story for posterity, or is it simply an attempt to prove that we existed in the first place? Perhaps, as our cities decay, landscapes shift, and mountains erode, our true legacy may not reside in the physical remnants we leave behind. Instead, it may be found in the long-term impact we have had on the Earth itself. Just as we have altered the composition of the atmosphere and oceans, future civilizations might study how our actions reshape the planet. They may find evidence of our technological ascent, carbon emissions, rising global temperatures, and mass extinctions. And in those remnants, they will uncover the story of a civilization that reached for the stars, but left behind the evidence of its collapse. As our technologies evolve at breakneck speed, the materials we create, those that serve our convenience today, will only compound the question of what future generations will make of them. The microelastics now present in every corner of the globe, from the deepest oceans to the most remote mountain ranges, will endure far beyond our own time. What will future generations think when they discover that we, a civilization capable of building towering skyscrapers and vast technological networks, also created substances that will persist for millions of years, far beyond our own existence? But could it be that the ultimate test for our civilization lies not in our achievement technologies, but in our ability to create something that withstands the ravages of time? To contemplate the idea of immortality, not for humanity itself, but for our civilization, is to dive into a complex blend of hope, dread, and existential curiosity. What if, instead of leaving behind mere debris, we could craft legacies, be they physical, digital, biological, or cultural, that continue to thrive across the epochs, immune to decay? Could we design structures or systems that persist, enduring through centuries, even millennia, long after our civilization has passed from the Earth? The concept of leaving a legacy that transcends the fleeting nature of our existence raises a crucial question. Would we be able to create something so enduring, something that reverberates through time, or would we simply be reminded of our inability to accept our own impermanence? What if, in our quest for immortality, we would be confronted with the very paradox of our nature, the awareness that even the most carefully constructed monuments are ultimately vulnerable to the passage of time? The ancient civilizations, from the Sumerians to the Aztecs, believed that their creations would outlast them, cementing their legacy in the face of death. Yet, despite their grandiosity, the passage of time proved them wrong. The monuments they constructed, the cities they built, and the cultures they nurtured are now little more than shadows of their former selves, scattered ruins overtaken by the elements. Yet, in this very observation, a question arises. Could we, with our advanced technologies and unparalleled understanding of the natural world, do better? Could we design something that endures not just a few centuries, but stretches across eons, surviving the collapse of cultures and the erosion of civilizations? What might such a lasting legacy look like? Perhaps it would take the form of a vast digital archive, a repository of knowledge encoded into the fabric of time itself. Imagine if we could preserve our collective wisdom and culture in a way that future civilizations could reconstruct and understand our way of life, like an ever-evolving digital DNA. Or perhaps it would be something even more profound, intangible, ideas, stories, knowledge so vital and universal that they would resonate across generations and epochs, surviving the inevitable changes in language, technology, and belief. But as we contemplate this vision of a timeless legacy, we are inevitably drawn to the concept of forgotten civilizations. Could it be that, in some distant future, the remnants of our age, the ruins of our cities, the fractured pieces of our culture, will be as significant to a future species as the ancient ruins of the Greeks or the Maya are to us today? What if our civilization, fragmented and partially forgotten, could one day be resurrected by another species, one that has learned how to decipher the cryptic traces we leave behind? Could these remnants, these half-remembered stories, become a cultural mirror for those who follow, just as the myths, languages, and artifacts of ancient civilizations have served as mirrors for us? The future, in its boundless uncertainty, may hold the answers to these questions. As we consider the marks we are leaving on the world, it becomes apparent that the story we are writing is far from complete. In fact, it's still unfolding, like a vast narrative yet to be told. And as we shape the world around us, there's a possibility, perhaps even a duty, that we will leave behind more than just a record of human achievements. We may, in fact, leave behind a legacy that speaks to the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of a future far beyond our mortal reach. A testament to human potential, deciphered and understood by those who come after us. This contemplation of our geological footprint, our legacy versus our waste, forces us to confront the dichotomy of progress and destruction. What will we leave behind, and how much of it will truly capture the essence of who we were? In the grand scheme of time, how much will future generations be able to learn from our traces? As the Earth continues to evolve, so too will the questions surrounding the rise, fall, and persistence of civilizations. Will we ever create something that can endure forever, or will we, like all civilizations before us, fade into the past, remembered only in fragments? Perhaps in considering the permanence of our actions, there's one final thought worth entertaining. What if, instead of obsessing over how we will be remembered, we shift our focus to the extraordinary potential of what we can still create during our brief time? What could humanity design that will endure, not just as a technological marvel or a monumental structure, but as a story, an idea, a vision that transcends the limitations of our brief mortal existence? Could we engineer a form of immortality for civilization, something not grounded in our own survival, but in the continuity of our culture, our ideas, and our legacy? When we reflect on the vastness of time, it's easy to imagine that human civilization, in its impermanence, will eventually fade into obscurity, like a faint whisper carried away by the winds of history. Our cities, monuments, and even the very memories of our achievements will succumb to the relentless forces of nature. But what if this doesn't have to be the inevitable conclusion? What if, through ingenuity, foresight, and imagination, we could design a civilization that somehow resists the inevitable pull of time, an eternal legacy inscribed into the very fabric of existence? The notion of immortality for civilizations, much like that of immortality for individuals, is both alluring and daunting. How do we build something that defies the erosive forces of centuries, millennia, or even eons? This challenge is made all the more difficult when we consider the impermanence of the physical world. Cities rise, flourish, and ultimately crumble, often leaving little more than the ruins of their former grandeur. Even the most iconic human creations, such as the pyramids, though resilient in their own right, are not immune to the passage of time, weathered and worn by the elements. The grandeur of these monuments, once the pride of civilizations, now stands as a reminder of their fragility. Yet perhaps the greatest challenge lies not in the preservation of our physical structures, but in the preservation of our knowledge. In an era where information is increasingly stored in digital formats, we find ourselves confronted by the possibility of a digital dark age. How can something as intangible as a digital archive endure? In 10,000 years, will our online records be little more than corrupted files, inaccessible links, and unreadable code? The thought that all the knowledge we've accumulated might vanish into a digital black hole is unsettling, but it's a very real concern. The dilemma of preserving knowledge is a problem that goes beyond digital archives. One only needs to look at the issue of nuclear waste disposal to understand the limitations of legacy. In the 1970s, the challenge arose of how to store nuclear waste in a way that would warn future generations of the dangers it posed. How could we ensure that future civilizations, potentially speaking a different language or interpreting symbols in radically different ways, would understand the threat? The proposed solution was to create monuments that could last for millennia, warning future societies of the hidden danger beneath their feet. But even the most advanced engineering cannot guarantee that these warnings will endure. What if the symbols we carve into stone, intended to convey a critical message, become nothing more than enigmatic relics, interpretations lost to time? This raises a broader question about the human impulse to be remembered. Our desire to build monuments, to leave behind something that endures, is deeply ingrained in the human psyche. But the very materials we use to preserve our greatest works, paper, ink, stone, are fragile. They too will succumb to time. Can we truly design something that will outlast the inevitable passage of centuries? And even if we could, who will be around to witness it? In a constantly shifting world, will our ideas remain relevant or will they become obsolete, overshadowed by future advancements? What if the answer isn't about immortality in the traditional sense, but rather resilience? What if we could design a civilization that acknowledges the inevitability of decay and seeks to embed itself deeply into the fabric of the earth, the universe, and time itself? Rather than aiming for a perfect preservation of our ideas and creations, perhaps we should focus on ensuring that they endure in some form, like the myths and stories of old which survive in fragments, but continue to echo through the generations. What if our legacy could live on in ways we've yet to imagine? Perhaps in the end, the question is not whether we can create a civilization that will last forever, but how we design a civilization that withstands the forces of time. Could we weave our culture into the very structure of the universe, making it inseparable from the world itself? Or will we, like all civilizations before us, become lost to time, remembered only in the myths we leave behind? As we contemplate these questions, we are led to think about the ethics of legacy, what it truly means to leave something for future generations. What do we want to be remembered for? And what, in the grand scheme of time, does it matter? These reflections invite us to consider not just the desire for immortality, but the deeper implications of our existence, our legacy, and our role in the grand story of time. What does it mean to live with the awareness that our civilization, no matter how grand, will one day fade into the abyss of time? And perhaps in this recognition lies the true challenge, to create something worthy of the ages, not because we want to be remembered, but because we understand the fleeting nature of our existence and seek to leave a mark that endures beyond our brief time on Earth. The quest for immortality has captivated the human imagination for millennia. Yet, as we delve deeper into this pursuit, we must ask ourselves, is the desire to live forever merely a stepping stone to something far more profound? The pursuit of endless life might be the catalyst for an even greater exploration of how our choices today will ripple through the future. How do we navigate the complex ethics of legacy, especially when we face the vast, uncharted territories of time that stretch far beyond our individual lifetimes? This question is more pressing than ever as we peer into the unknowns of tomorrow, while also reflecting on the past, a past that may, in some sense, have already shaped the world we now inhabit. When we think of legacy, the first images that come to mind are often monumental achievements, towering structures, grand gestures, and timeless artifacts that speak to the endurance of human civilization. Yet beneath these visible markers of our existence lies a much more profound and challenging question. What should we truly leave behind? In a world where every action seems to have a long-lasting impact, can we craft a legacy that goes beyond mere remembrance? Or do we risk leaving something far more complex? Perhaps a warning for future generations that comes not as a triumph, but as a cautionary tale. This question invites us to consider the very essence of what legacy means. It is not just about how future societies might recall our names or our deeds, but about the actual impact we have on the world and the kind of mark we leave on it. Our legacy will not only be shaped by our greatest feats, but by the smaller, more subtle choices we make, the footprints we leave behind in the sands of time. The delicate balance between stewardship and consumption is at the heart of this contemplation. Throughout the course of human history, we have played both the roles of creators and destroyers. We have been stewards of the earth, but we have also been consumers, often taking more than we need from the planet without fully understanding the consequences of our actions. As we look to the future, we are faced with the same duality. Will we leave behind a thriving world for future generations to inherit? Or will our legacy serve as a testament to our unchecked appetites and the irreversible consequences of our exploitation of natural resources? Imagine for a moment the world around us as an intricate, fragile ecosystem, one that has been evolving for billions of years. Our civilization, in comparison, is but a fleeting moment in the grand timeline of the Earth's history. We are, in many ways, temporary custodians of a planet that has endured far longer than any of us. But have we acted responsibly in our stewardship, or have we simply taken what we wanted without fully considering the broader implications? It's easy to think of legacy in terms of monumental achievements, Think of the ancient pyramids, the first moon landing, or revolutionary technological innovations that have reshaped the world. But what about the unseen costs? The deforestation that has ravaged vast ecosystems, the plastic islands choking our oceans, the countless species driven to extinction. Are we ready to acknowledge these dark chapters in our inheritance as well? The question of what we should leave behind is not just about preserving great monuments or constructing enduring artifacts. It's about the kind of imprint we want to make on the world. Perhaps instead of glorifying our conquests and triumphs, our legacy should be founded on the principles of responsibility and a deep awareness of the fragility of our planet. Imagine a future in which humanity looks back and sees not a world decimated by progress, but one nurtured and protected, a place where wisdom and stewardship reign over the hunger for consumption. Would that not be the kind of legacy worth striving for? A legacy not rooted in dominance, but in collaboration, with the Earth, with its ecosystems, and with each other. However, stewardship itself is a double-edged sword. There is a looming question that casts a shadow over our attempts to secure a positive legacy. Should our legacy, in some ways, be a warning? After all, we live in a time of urgent environmental crises, climate change, resource depletion, and the widespread loss of biodiversity. If future civilizations were to unearth the remnants of our history, what would they discover? Would they uncover the slow unraveling of a species unable to check its own excesses? Perhaps our legacy will not be one of prosperity and achievement, but one of caution, a testament to the dangers of overreaching, a reminder of what happens when humanity fails to harmonize with the natural world. It is possible that long after we have vanished from the earth, future generations might look at the remains of our cities, decayed, buried under centuries of soil, and interpret them as symbols of human folly. They might understand these ruins as a cautionary tale, a civilization that thrived for a time only to collapse under the weight of its own unsustainable practices. Could our greatest contribution to the future, then, be this? A warning preserved in the layers of time, carved into the historical record for those who follow, so that they might learn from our mistakes. This idea is not a new one. It echoes through many ancient cultures, each with its own stories warning of the dangers of human hubris. The Tower of Babel, for instance, stands as a powerful metaphor for human ambition gone astray, an ambition that reaches too far, too fast, and ends in catastrophe. Throughout history, we have seen civilizations rise and fall, each one driven by the same desire to conquer and dominate. Yet, those same civilizations often fall because of their overreaching, an ambition that cannot be sustained. Could we, as a species, be writing our own version of this myth? One where the tower is not built of bricks, but of overconsumption, environmental degradation, and unchecked greed? If we come to accept that our legacy might, in some respects, be a warning, we must confront the unsettling possibility that future generations will not remember us for our grandeur or our triumphs. Instead, they may remember us for the consequences of our actions, the collapse of ecosystems, the loss of biodiversity, and the environmental scars we leave on the planet. Perhaps in the distant future, humanity will not be remembered through the monuments we built, but through the echoes of our failures preserved in the geological layers of the earth, waiting to be uncovered by those who come after us. This shift in perspective is difficult to embrace. It challenges us to rethink what we value and what we hope to pass on. Is it enough simply to be remembered? To have our names etched into the annals of history? Or should we strive to leave behind something far more profound, a deeper understanding of our place in the world, a recognition of our responsibility to the earth, and a reminder of our duty to those who will inherit the world after us? The ethics of legacy are not just about what we leave behind. They are also about the relationships we build, the choices we make, and the moral framework we establish along the way. Legacy, in this sense, is something that is constantly shaped by the actions of individuals, communities, and entire civilizations over time. But how do we influence this legacy? How do we craft a world that future generations can admire, not just as a triumph of human ingenuity, but as a model of sustainable progress, a reminder of the delicate balance between advancement and preservation? As we grapple with these questions, we begin to feel the weight of a new kind of legacy, one that does not demand eternal remembrance, but instead calls for reflection and learning. As we look toward the distant future, we begin to understand that the answers may not lie in the monuments we build or the innovations we achieve. Instead, the most enduring legacy may lie in the wisdom we impart to future generations, wisdom that will remain long after we are gone if they are willing to listen and learn from it. This leads us to a deeper and more personal question. How does ego influence our pursuit of legacy? Do we need to be the first, the greatest, the most remembered? Or can we step back and recognize that our place in history may not be as significant as we once thought? Human beings have an inherent desire to feel unique, distinct from all other creatures on this planet, and perhaps from all others throughout the universe. This desire for exceptionalism is woven into the very fabric of our cultural myths, religious narratives, and scientific endeavors. The idea that we are the pinnacle of intelligence, the first civilization to reach such heights, offers us comfort. It reassures us that our accomplishments matter, that we are special in some fundamental way. But what if that belief is not entirely true? What if we are not the first? What if another civilization, long lost to time, once occupied the very space we now occupy? This need to believe in our uniqueness has shaped the way we view ourselves. The myth of human exceptionalism permeates every corner of our societies, from ancient stories of gods creating humans to modern quests for extraterrestrial intelligence. We look to the stars not only because of the vast, uncharted frontier, but because it is difficult for us to imagine that we might not be alone in our intellectual and technological capacities. Yet, history has shown us that many empires and civilizations have risen and fallen, each of them at the time, yet believing they were the first or the greatest. And where are they now? There is a certain quiet irony in this realization. If human civilization were not the first, it would require a complete shift in our worldview. Instead of seeing ourselves as the culmination of billions of years of evolutionary progress, we might come to view our story as part of a much larger, ongoing cycle. Our current moment could be seen not as a grand beginning, but as a brief flare in a vast and complex cosmic narrative, a cycle of rise and fall that repeats across the eons. What does it mean for us to confront the possibility that we are not the first intelligent civilization? That our existence may be just one chapter in a far larger story? It challenges everything we think we know about human identity. The myth of human exceptionalism may be one of the most comforting lies we tell ourselves. But perhaps it is time to let go of this narrative, to step away from the ego-driven drive to be first and instead embrace the complexity and humility that comes with recognizing that we may be part of a far larger, recurring pattern of development in the history of the universe. In doing so, we might finally begin to understand what it truly means to be human. What if the true narrative of human history is not only more intricate, but far older and deeper than we are willing to admit? Could the story of humanity's rise as the first truly intelligent civilization be nothing more than a comforting myth, one that we have crafted to reassure ourselves of our place in the cosmos? Myths, however deeply embedded in the human psyche, are often the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world around us. They help us frame the complexities of existence, providing a comforting structure when faced with the unknown. But what if this myth is merely a veil, concealing a far more complex reality? As we begin to peer through the remnants of what might have been a lost civilization, one that predated us by millennia, it's possible that we will come to a startling realization. The path we are walking today has already been walked before. The questions that we find ourselves asking, questions of purpose, of progress, of civilization's place in the grand tapestry of time, may have already been asked by those who came long before us. What would it mean then for us to stand on the shoulders of these long-forgotten giants, to look out into the unknown, not with the hubris of being the first to venture, but with the humbling knowledge that we are not the first to dream, to build, or to fall? Perhaps in this light, we are not the unique anomaly we have always imagined ourselves to be. In our relentless search for meaning, might we need to release the notion that human civilization is irreplaceable, that we are the pinnacle of a natural process rather than one step in an ongoing cyclical evolution. What if we are merely a chapter in a story that has been unfolding for eons, one that we may only dimly perceive? The question then becomes, could the true value of human civilization lie not in our being the first or the only, but in the understanding that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, a perpetual cycle of creation and destruction, of rise and fall, stretching across the eons? This idea challenges the very core of human identity. It strikes at the heart of what it means to be human. We have long believed that we are more than mere accidents of nature, that we are the inevitable culmination of evolutionary forces. This concept has underpinned everything from our sense of destiny to our conception of progress. To challenge this, to consider that we might be nothing more than another instance in an ongoing cycle, shakes the very foundation of how we perceive ourselves. Yet paradoxically, it is within this disorientation, this unsettling realignment of our understanding, that we may find the deeper truths we seek. It is a reminder that the search for truth rarely leads to simple answers, but instead often brings us face to face with even more profound and complex questions. In reconsidering the uniqueness of the human experience, we may come to realize that our identity is far less self-centered than we have been led to believe. What if we are not the culmination of an evolutionary journey, but merely a moment in a larger cosmic web of life and intelligence? With this shift in perspective, we might begin to ask a far more fundamental question. What if the idea of a first civilization is not a singular event in time, but rather a recurring moment, a series of civilizations that rise, fall, and are eventually rediscovered? This, too, could be a part of a larger cyclical process where every rise is destined to be followed by a fall, and each fall contains within it the potential for rebirth. From this point of view, it becomes almost inevitable to consider whether all civilizations, whether ancient or modern, are doomed to follow a similar arc, an arc that rises to greatness, only to be undone by the very forces that once made them great. The question of whether every civilization in its quest for progress is ultimately destined for self-destruction is as old as humanity itself. From the first empires that spanned the rivers of Mesopotamia to the towering cities of our present day, we see the same pattern, a promise of progress, always shadowed by the specter of decline. The ruins of once great civilizations tell a haunting tale. The Sumerians, whose innovations in writing and urbanization laid the foundation for future societies, are now distant echoes, their accomplishments buried beneath the sands of time. The Romans, whose empire once spanned 3 continents, left behind a legacy of law, art, and infrastructure, but were undone by internal decay. The Maya, the masters of the Mesoamerican jungles, have left behind only empty cities and a mystery of what led to their collapse. And now, as we gaze upon the towering achievements of our own civilization, we must ask, are we any different? Are we too merely standing on the edge of our own self-inflicted downfall, too blinded by our own accomplishments to see the cracks that are beginning to form? The law of entropy offers a sobering lens through which to view this inevitable cycle. Described in scientific terms as the gradual decline of order into disorder, entropy seems to echo through the course of human civilization. Over time, all systems, whether biological, mechanical, or societal, tend toward decay. Energy dissipates, order fades, chaos reigns. In this context, every leap forward in human progress, every technological breakthrough seems to bring us closer to an inevitable end. The question arises, is every advancement merely accelerating the process of collapse? Can civilization, in its very nature, be a self-canceling force? If we look back through history, we see that the rise and fall of civilizations often go hand in hand with their most profound achievements. Take, for example, the discovery of agriculture. It allowed early humans to settle and form cities, yet it also introduced the need for land control, inequality, and conflict. The development of written language fueled the spread of knowledge, but also gave rise to bureaucracy, corruption, and the manipulation of information. And, in more recent times, industrialization, while ushering in an age of unprecedented wealth and power, has also brought with it the environmental degradation that threatens the very fabric of modern society. This paradox raises a chilling possibility. Could it be that all civilizations, no matter how advanced, are destined to collapse under the weight of their own creations? Each technological leap, each cultural achievement could be sowing the seeds for its eventual undoing. From an ecological perspective, we are watching the X unfold in real time. Our dependence on fossil fuels, the clearing of forests, the depletion of natural resources. All of these advances may come at a cost too high for the planet to bear. Is this the ultimate fate of civilization? Rise to its zenith, only to unravel under the weight of its own progress? Yet perhaps the story doesn't end with collapse. Perhaps the fall of one civilization is simply the prelude to the rise of another. History teaches us that some of humanity's greatest advancements have emerged from the ashes of disaster. The fall of the Roman Empire, for instance, paved the way for the Renaissance, a period of cultural rebirth and intellectual flourishing. It seems that civilization, far from dying, reinvents itself. It transforms, evolves, and begins anew, albeit in a different form. But even this presents a lingering question. Is the fall of civilization truly the end? What if we began to view the self-destructive cycle not as a fatal flaw, but as an integral part of an ongoing, endless process? Perhaps what we are witnessing is not the collapse of civilization, but rather its metamorphosis, its continual evolution in response to the forces that govern both creation and destruction. And in this context, self-destruction might not be the end at all, but a part of the larger cycle, a necessary phase that allows for the next iteration of life, intelligence, and civilization to emerge. As we look beyond our own moment in time, we might also wonder if other civilizations have risen and fallen in the distant past, as some suggest. Did they encounter the same fate? Did they too create vast empires, only to succumb to the forces they unleashed? Perhaps their story mirrors our own, driven by the same desire to create, to innovate, only to be undone by the very systems they built. And what if the story of all civilizations, whether past, present, or future, is not one of ultimate triumph or failures, but of a never-ending dance between creation and destruction? An eternal cycle of growth, decay, and rebirth that stretches across the eons, building upon itself with each turn. Could it be that the very act of civilization, the act of being alive, of existing within a system, is an expression of both creation and entropy, a dual force that propels life forward, even as it pulls everything toward inevitable decay? And if that is the case, then what does it mean for us, for our own mortality? The inevitability of entropy touches something deeply profound within us, making us question whether we can truly escape the fate of all that has come before. Or perhaps we are merely another part of an immense cyclical journey, one that stretches far beyond the limits of our comprehension. As we ponder these questions, we might find the answers in the very nature of our own mortality. There is something humbling about the certainty of endings. As humans, we often search for meaning in the fleeting span of our lives, clinging to the idea that our actions will leave a lasting mark on time. But perhaps the true meaning lies not in what we create, but in how we understand the inevitable process of becoming and unbecoming, of creation and destruction, of life and death. As we look into the vast expanse of deep history, one question inevitably arises. What happens to the meaning of a civilization once it has disappeared? It seems almost too big to comprehend how something so impactful, so significant in its time, could fade into oblivion. In this constant passage of time, the question emerges, will the essence of our civilization still hold weight even when it has long since vanished? Could the cycle of human history, which feels so unique to us, be simply a momentary blip in a broader cyclical pattern that has existed long before us and will continue long after? Now imagine a stone thrown into a calm pond. At first the water barely stirs, but soon the ripples begin to spread. Gradually, they grow fainter, stretching farther until they vanish entirely, leaving no trace of their existence. On the surface, this metaphor seems to fit neatly with the life cycle of human civilization. We make an immediate impact, but as time passes, our influence begins to dissipate, fading away into the future. Yet, unlike the stone, which sinks and is ultimately forgotten beneath the surface, human civilizations do not entirely vanish. They leave something behind, an imprint that, over millennia, is shaped and worn down by time, the forces of nature and human action. Could it be that, even after they are gone, the echoes of past civilizations reverberate in ways we cannot yet fathom? This question takes on even more weight when we consider the possibility of ancient civilizations that predate ours, civilizations that may have existed long before recorded history, lost beneath the layers of time and the earth. Some theories, like the Silurian Hypothesis, suggest that there might have been advanced societies far older than our own, buried so deeply in the sands of time that their existence has long since slipped out of human memory. If such civilizations existed, their legacy might be hidden, waiting to be uncovered. But as much as we yearn to understand and connect with these ancient people, the very act of discovering their remnants might not be enough to restore their meaning. Could it be that their significance is irretrievably lost, eroded by time, to the point where it is no longer recognizable or even understandable? The idea that meaning could slip away with the loss of memory is comforting in its simplicity. Yet it's also somewhat naive. We often think of meaning as something intimately tied to human experience, something that can be understood, interpreted, and preserved through the artifacts and stories left behind by past societies. Our art, our monuments, our written words, these are the markers we leave for future generations. They are our attempt to create something eternal, something that transcends the boundaries of time. But what happens when these markers disappear? What happens when the very symbols and stories we use to communicate the essence of our civilization are lost? A civilization that no longer speaks to us directly may seem to have lost its voice, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has lost its heartbeat. It could still be there, faintly echoing, buried beneath the surface of time, awaiting rediscovery. However, to uncover these echoes, we must recognize a crucial truth. Our understanding of the past is often limited by our own biases and the tools we use to interpret it. Our language, our cultural lens, and our very conception of history are all colored by the present moment, which means that our understanding of the past can never be entirely objective. The remnants of ancient civilizations, their art, their technology, their rituals, may no longer make sense to us. A painting that once symbolized a society's highest ideals might now be seen merely as an interesting artistic piece, devoid of the deep meanings it once held. A tool, once a practical instrument of daily life, could now be perceived as nothing more than a curious artifact, its original function lost to time. We try to read these remnants, to reconstruct their meaning, but sometimes the story has slipped so far into the mists of time that we can no longer grasp it fully. Yet, what if the act of forgetting itself isn't the end? What if meaning, far from being extinguished, persists in ways we don't fully comprehend? Could it be that even when the language of a civilization has been lost to time, its essence can still endure, hidden in the undercurrents of history, waiting to be rediscovered? Imagine for a moment a future archaeologist standing in front of the ruins of our own civilization, our crumbling cities, our fractured digital footprints, and the strange, unidentifiable objects we leave behind. How would they interpret our lives, our technologies, our achievements? Would they be able to find any meaning in our existence? Or would they too be left to piece together fragments, struggling to reconstruct a coherent story of who we were? Perhaps we have underestimated the resilience of meaning itself. In the end, the human drive to create, to leave behind something that endures, might not be as futile as it often seems. Even after we are gone, our presence might continue to reverberate in ways we cannot yet foresee, like a melody that lingers in the air long after the last note has been played. In fact, meaning might not just persist. It may take on a life of its own, flowing through the currents of time, reaching future generations who are attuned to it. Just as we find meaning in the remnants of past civilizations, so too might our future resonate in the lives of those who come after us. In this light, the notion of being the first in human history becomes less important. Perhaps we are not the originators of civilization, but rather a continuation of something much larger, a cycle that began long before us and will continue long after we are gone. The realization that we are not the first to walk this path does not diminish our significance. In fact, it may deepen it. If we are part of an ongoing story, a tale of creation, destruction, and rebirth, then our role in this narrative becomes part of something far grander than our individual lives. As we examine our place in this unfolding story, we are forced to ask ourselves, where do we fit in? What role do we play in the ongoing dance of life on Earth? It's easy to believe that our civilization represents the pinnacle of human achievement, the culmination of all that has come before. But what if we are not the endpoint, but just a single moment in a long and ongoing dialogue? What if our purpose is not to be the first, but to carry forward the wisdom, the lessons, and the legacies of those who came before us and those who will follow after us? The search for meaning, then, becomes not a quest to prove our uniqueness, but an exploration of how we are connected to everything that has ever existed and everything that is yet to come. This realization is humbling, yet it also opens up new avenues for reflection. It suggests that the true meaning of civilization may not lie in its singularity, but in its continuity. It lies in the connections it shares with the past and in the patterns it forms with those who will come after. Civilization is not a static, isolated moment, but a thread in an ever-evolving tapestry of life. As we contemplate these questions, it becomes clear that we are not writing the final chapter of history. We are adding our voice to an ongoing narrative tree, one that stretches far beyond our understanding. The mysteries of what came before us and what will follow in our wake may forever remain tantalizingly out of reach. Yet it is in this uncertainty that we find our drive to understand, to explore, and to continue. As civilizations rise and fall, our understandings of life, death, and meaning also evolve. The end of one story often becomes the beginning of another, each chapter contributing to the larger narrative of existence. In this light, the decline of a civilization might not be something to fear, but rather something to embrace. It is simply part of the natural rhythm of life, and in accepting this rhythm, we may find peace, and perhaps even the deeper meaning we have been seeking. So as we ponder the future, it's worth considering a deeper question. What if meaning isn't something we need to search for at all? What if it's something that quietly finds us, nestled in the spaces between all we've ever known? Perhaps as we turn our gaze toward the future, we'll come to understand that the true question isn't whether we will leave behind something meaningful, but whether the meaning we find in the moment is enough for now. And in that quiet acceptance, we may find that the search for meaning, at last, is its own answer.